Hey, welcome back to the Black Ibis Social Club. Another beautiful day in South Carolina. It's actually fantastic today. It was rainy for a while. Anyways, today we have our usual, permanent guest host from another mother, Mr. Fisto Sabani. What's up, Fisto?
Yes, hello everyone. Nice to see you.
And of course, we have a man visiting us from the great north, right? The brothers Krynn. What's up, man?
Well, not much other than just nonstop rain these days. Um, it's a good thing you said Great North because if you had said Great White North, I'd have had to correct you and say it's not white
Oh,
anymore,
touche.
sadly.
The great,
But
the great Curry North.
uh, if only it was white still.
Is there maple curry up there now? Is maple curry?
Probably
Sure.
tastes gross. But that's only in Toronto and Ottawa, the Indian cities of Canada, along with
Uh,
Brampton and other places. Where I am,
Tim
it's still
Hortons,
most.
Tim
Yeah,
Horton,
we call it
Hortons curry
Snickers.
curry maple donut. Let's go.
that sounds pretty good, actually. Like I told John Carter last week, I don't even know where Canada is, man. Um,
Well,
but why don't you
there's still
introduce
some good
yourself?
stuff.
Why don't you introduce yourself? Most of the people listening already know you because they've read your stuff on Substack. Uh, what should I call you? Brothers Krynn, Mr. Brothers Krynn,
Joe works.
that works.
Because I'm Joe from
Assad,
Brothers.
you're Canadian now, right?
Well, for those who don't know me, I'm Joe from Brothers Krynn. We're two brothers. We write a bunch of stories every week, and we also analyze, it seems, nothing but literature and occasionally history or whatever other topic suits us for the day. And we also try to help promote other people's stories when we can. Um, so yeah, just Joe or Bryn or something works.
Right. Well, you guys do a lot of short story sharing. You share it around the community. You do a lot of you do a lot of
Hmm.
wrangling of other people and stuff, and it's actually really cool. You guys are using Substack to, I think, the best of, you're mining it for the best content and use instead of some of the stupid ways people can use Substack. So I actually really enjoy your guys' stuff. I know you do podcasts sometimes
Oh,
also, right?
thanks. Yeah, we do history podcasts mostly, an occasional podcast where we interview other fantasy authors to try to promote them too. So like next week, I'm hoping to get, at the time of this recording, I'm hoping to get Eric Falden, and he's a guy who does a lot of the similar stuff that I do in terms of analyzing the genre, analyzing metaphysics, and analyzing great authors of the past. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, we try to mine it for everything fiction and history, doing the podcast or with the writing. Um, but although I'm not sure how other people tend to use Substack for the most part, I mostly pay attention to the history sphere and the fiction sphere these days.
Well, me and Fisto
Although I do like how
usually,
Pisto uses it.
yeah, me and Fisto just call people retarded. I mean, it's pretty much, and
I'm I'm more or less just trying to pathfind the most bipolar experience possible. Um, I had my first note go viral. So I gained a bunch of subscribers. I'm looking forward to publishing something in June and just watch that number drop. Just as
yeah,
like, wait, this guy's notes and his actual Substack don't really match at all. And it's like, yes, that's working as intended, friend.
I feel like lately we've been like being kind of like old school. We've been pissing off leftists for a while, and I feel like we need to start pissing off, those like pagan Nordic posters because I feel like they've been. I feel like
Oh,
what I noticed on Substack. Whatever conversation we have,
yeah.
there's like funguses that like sprout, like mushrooms or weeds, and like
Mhm.
1 week and 1 month you'll have like retardoid leftoid weeds that like sprout out, and you got to go out there and stomp them out, and then you finally get rid of all these leftoid retards like posting on your stuff. specifically Fisto, because he seems to attract them. And then like you're like,
It's a
oh,
gift. It's a gift.
finally silence for like a week.
Yeah.
And then now you got
Peace
mushrooms.
at last.
Yeah, you got mushrooms that sprout everywhere, and they're not like the good, cute kind that like you can eat and become big, like in Mario. They're like disgusting, like parasitic fungi, and it's like some right wing,
Mm.
like some super like retard. And right now we have the explosion of like retardo pagan calling you a Christ cuck type of stuff, like, and it's just like, oh,
Yeah, I've noticed them.
stop, stop.
I Ironically, my Christendom post was me just refuting them and saying, well, what about Charlemagne? Arguably the greatest conqueror in European history. What about
Well,
him? Does
right.
this extend to him? Because he was a pretty hardcore Christian.
Well,
And
ultimately, librarian of Solano is getting into a lot of it. I've noticed with like Cat Girl
mm,
Kulak or whatever. And the problem is, you don't
yeah,
even need to get into apologetics with those people because you're like, first of all, I'm arguing with a dude
mm,
named Cat Girl Kulak who's a troon, right? End of conversation. There
Yeah.
you
yeah,
go. Like, if your worldview, even if like even if you think that like Christianity or any religion is wrong, I know it's at least not something that's going to lead me to becoming a troon named Catgirl Kulak. End of conversation. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, I'll take whatever is
and
the opposite of that.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Same.
there's no discussion. I don't want to hear about it. I don't. It's just like, wait a second, who are you? Oh, you're a dude that goes by Catgirl Kulak, and you're trans.
Conversation over.
So we're done. There's nothing to say here because you're obviously mentally ill, and I'm not interested in any further conversation because I
Well,
don't walk down the street and talk to schizophrenics. It's like done.
there is something you could say. You could say retard and just there, done.
Yeah.
Because okay, well, you do just need to get it off your chest. I've been learning a lot from Fisto. I consider myself one of his dark apprentices.
Oh
So
God.
on
It's
Twitter,
it's
I'm running
funny.
into these guys,
It's
and
funny.
it's
So
just
like, sorry, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm supposed to engage with these people on Twitter, but more and more, I'm just saying retard and just blocking. Or I'm saying what I want to say and then I block on Twitter because I don't want to argue with them. It's just, what's the point? And what's worse is, I'll be honest, as a teen at one point, I actually became one of those pagan guys. But it's not because I hated Christianity exactly. It's just that my teen brain couldn't quite follow it.
Right, because you were
And I
literally
got really,
retarded. You were just retarded. It's okay. I
yeah,
understand. And sometimes you can,
yeah,
the retardation can heal. The neural
yeah,
pathways can remap themselves. And one day you wake up, you look in the mirror,
yeah,
you're like, wow, I'm no longer a retard. And,
retard.
but those people
Exactly.
are hopeless. There is no fixing of the retardation. And it's like
Mhm.
a busted car that's fallen off a mountain and it's done. It's game over. There's no point in engaging with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I
it's
would
also that I
strongly
ended
agree.
up
I mean,
thinking about,
I had my Protestant stage when I was a
mm,
teenager, and yeah, it's just because I was a
yeah,
moron and I didn't know any better, and I didn't know what I was doing with my life. So,
yeah.
here I am in my Catholic
No, I
mystic
ended up,
stage, and we're
yeah.
just gonna go from there.
Uh,
Yep. I went from Catholic to atheist to pagan to atheist to Catholic again. So I did the entire journey. And yeah, ironically, it just took me going back to church at least once and just reading and well, like Tolkien's about his walk with C.S. Lewis, and where he discussed how every myth is just a window or a shard of the actual truth that is, well, our Lord. So that kind of got me thinking. And then, you read about apologetics. And then there's also the radicalization that was COVID. And, back to Catholicism, it is.
right.
Um, so retardation healed,
Right. And
but not everyone.
in
That's
the
not
Lord,
for
in the
everyone.
Lord's grace, there is hope for even the greatest retard,
Yeah.
except Catgirl Kulak is just beyond redemption.
Yeah, except for him.
No, man, you know what? We were going to talk about this, but we're going to talk about this, right? The pagan thing is interesting, okay? Because a part of me is sympathetic. I am sympathetic to it. In the same way, you mentioned C.S. Lewis, right? And his Surprised
Mm.
by Joy book, which is basically the story of him coming to Christianity. You could, you can
It's
make
a
a
beautiful thing.
you can make it, it's a wonderful book, right? And you can make a very like truthful argument, accurate argument that C.S. Lewis came to Christianity through a sort of intellectual paganism, and
Yep.
and it's inarguable, um, and in a way, in our like disenchanted, desacralized world, any sort of religious um, ejaculation or what the word for it is, emanation coming out of somebody is good, I guess. In a way, you can sort of like sympathize with somebody that still has at least the attempt to um, touch the sacred or the metaphysical plane. It's better than some like
Mm.
AI worshiping fucking transhumanist
Oh
retard,
yeah.
I'll take that. Um, the problem with a lot of the pagan bro type stuff is that one, it's mostly a LARP. They you know,
Yeah,
just mostly a LARP, right?
it is.
And there is, you're making it up. How is your, you, the fact that we're using the word pagan is silly. Because the idea is that like paganism is just a term used by early Christians to describe people that did not believe in God, in Jesus, in Christianity, or weren't part of that overall lineage, like the pre-New Testament Jews, for example. So it's a word, it's a blanket word that describes everybody from Japanese practicers of Shinto, Japanese religion, to all the numerous uncollected weird local cults that get lumped under the rather post hoc
Yep.
created idea of Hinduism, because Hinduism as a
Mm.
world religion did not exist until the British basically named it, right? There was nobody going, oh, I'm a Hindu,
Yeah.
really until the 19th century. And then you can
There.
say Buddhism is also pagan, right? Well, the mystical, metaphysical
Yeah.
Buddhism as opposed to the strictly atheistic Buddhism. And then, obviously, pagans are all the Proto-European religions, the local religions that we have almost no records of whatsoever. And you've got the Native American religions are pagan. So when somebody says pagan, I'm like, oh, so what do you mean? What are you? Do you worship the Dacian Dutchin god Zalmoxis? So once a year, do you throw your firstborn son into a pit of spears? And if he dies quickly, it's going to be a good year. But if he doesn't, it's going to be a bad year. When was the last time you threw somebody into a pit of spears?
Well, my students would
Well,
say
just
it's
last
nearly
week
every
actually.
day.
All right. Or do you go to the Oracle of Delphi and, you know, ask her for guidance? Or do you burn
Well,
incense to Isis? I mean, what does paganism mean? What is that? I'm
would it
curious.
help if I said I visited the Oracle to try to find a wife? But all I got told was fuck off with your really bad hair clays action.
Uh, you went to the Oracle of Delphi?
No, no. But I imagine the Oracle would be pretty annoyed with my attempt at writing some Heracles fiction.
I'm
The
sure.
thing, the thing about those pagan stories is that they're great stories, but like the Norse sagas, the Greek epics, there's nothing like them. But here's the thing we have to bear in mind. There's one story that's actually surpassed them, and that's for a reason. It's because it's the truth, that of the Bible. The thing with these pagan stories is they're great tales, but that's all they are. They're basically folk tales. They're folklore that's ascended in a way, as Tolkien put it. Like, because you get folklore, then you get mythology.
Hmm.
And they're great, but you can't lose yourself in them because that's like losing yourself in a game or in the joys of chasing retards and calling them retards. At some point, it might overtake your life, and you don't have much else. Although Fisto has his students to ground him when he's not tossing them into a pit of spears. So,
Yes.
like, Fisto's not in danger of losing himself. I am, but not him.
Right.
But that's the thing. When I was a kid, I started reading all these great mythological epics, and that's what kind of consumed me. But as an adult, when I realized it's just because I like the stories, it's not because I actually believe in them or anything. You sink into despair, and like, then I lost a friend on my birthday, and he was a reverend, and he was always subtly trying to guide me back. And you kind of then come back and you realize, well, I let him down in life. And you go to church and you realize the joy that is community, and that the pagan stories I had associated with Europe were not as European as the faith. Arguably, Christianity is far more European than anything else
Right.
out there. So if you really want a European or a white-coated religion, this is it. And um, that really had a strong impact on my way of thinking. And of course, Librarian of Kaleno, I hope I pronounced that right. I always say Seleno Pascal, I think. Well,
I
I'm,
see it
I'm
too,
from,
yeah.
but reading his stuff has had a large impact on me, as well as Brother Alexander. He now calls himself Alexander Dalbini. Reading their stuff and their apologetics and their writings, and some Lewis and Tolkienian apologetics and whatnot, uh, did really, it leaves an impact. And I guess I can actually boast that I came to back to Christianity through pagan intellectualism, just like Lewis kind of did,
Right.
which is something I had thought about maybe writing an article about down the road, but I'd want to do it just on his book instead and just explore that in
Surprised by
itself.
joy or
Yeah, Surprised by Joy, because I
right.
think it's a great piece, and I've been encouraged by a friend from Finland who also helped me return to faith. Uh, well, he's a pastor, and he's basically my online pastor. So um, we first met because we're both Conan fans and we were in a book club. But since then, he's kind of been a bit of a guide like that, and he's been very encouraging. And so he's told me to try to write more on Christianity on my blog, which I had resisted for a time because I wasn't sure, because I'm also profiting from this, and there's that fear of profiting from your faith, and that's something that I'm very much afraid of.
Right.
And but he said if you don't do it for profit, but you maybe make sure you maybe put this in your Iron Crown section or something. Maybe that'll mean that you're not profiting, and that's something that appeals to me a great deal. So I
Right.
might put it there.
Well, and I tend to steer away from discussing any type of theology or uh, specific
Mm,
uh, specific, points of contention, or anything that might be even considered truly apologetics. Why? Because
mhm. That's fine.
while I was born in the church and I was baptized as a baby. I only recently returned after many years of atheism and then a little bit of like
Mm,
8 years of like slowly inching my way back. But it wasn't until recently I I feel like I have a pretty, good grasp of the ideas, but I'm not a priest
mhm.
and I'm not a monk
Yeah,
and I'm not a theologian
same.
and I cannot speak for the greater church with any level of authority. What I can do, and
Same.
which I have no problem doing, is I can tell my own opinion and like make sure I always
Mm,
bracket it with like, well, this is how I feel about this issue, you know? And in the case of paganism or the pagan bros on the internet, once again,
oh my.
the only pagans I've ever met in real life, or people that claimed that they were pagans, were like Renaissance fair people that were in like weird like polycules before that term existed and would have like
Yeah.
they would work at the Renaissance fair, like, playing music or selling like turkey legs or whatever. Then they would have creepy like bisexual orgies at night in the tents. That was the kind of that's why I associate with pagans. And they're funny enough, they're very left wing people, not a shred of right wingism into them. That's the real life pagans I've met in my experience. But I'm sure there's some based pagans, I guess, somewhere out there. But
Somewhere.
somewhere outside the internet. What what I think though, I want to be charitable. I do. I really want to be charitable because I think that if somebody truly, honestly believes in, explores the metaphysical and explores,
Mm.
I think, I think that the writer Mircea Eliade, who everybody should read, his "The Sacred and the Profane" is one of the best books on this topic. If
Hmm.
we take him at, take his ideas, he talks about that the world we live in has become desacralized. It's become profane, and that has left us empty. And there's a hole in our, in our spiritual existence where in the early days, whether it was the prehistoric or the Bronze Ages and the Stone Ages, the Steel Age, the Iron Ages and stuff, in the Middle Ages, well into the Renaissance, and up until the early modern world, and even a good fair amount into the early modern world, humans have lived in direct contact with the sacred. Where in the pre-electrical ages, we lived by firelight, by oil lamp. We lived around the churches that made the center of our villages, or the cathedral that made the center of our towns and cities. We, every day was a day of like, our calendar that we followed was based on the church, and we followed the feast days and the days of mourning and the celebrations all around the liturgical calendar, all around the changing of the seasons, and everything was a lot more sacred, than it is today. I mean, even if you look at medieval and Renaissance towns and cities and villages, the graveyards were in neighborhoods and next to people instead of these giant kind of like well
Yeah.
manicured, like, out of sight, out of mind in most of our modern contemporary world. So we live in a very desacralized
Yeah.
world. And paganism is, in so I'm 42 years old, and I came of age, and I entered my 20s kicking and screaming into at the height of the atheist world, right? So I turned 20 in like 2001 or something. No, I'm sorry, 2003 or something, which was right at the height of the Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins atheist era. And, people would make fun of Christianity, and people would make fun of that. And we had a good 10, 15 years of, science and worshiping science where it became, passe to like even think about anything like remotely spiritual. I mean, we made fun of like lefty crystal girls and that kind of stuff just as much as they make fun of Christians. And I've
Which, in
seen
defense of making fun of the Crystal Girls, it's still fun.
it is still fun, yeah, to make fun of them.
Yeah.
Um, the more and more, though, as time passed, I've noticed that there is a yearning for a spiritual world, a yearning for a disconnect. I mean, you could say, and I believe this, that a lot of COVID was really connected to the boomer generation's complete in fear of judgment and death, right? We've become so disconnected from
Mhm.
death that these people would destroy their life because they want to avoid like death because they're so terrified of it, And they've gotten to the point of like they would avoid a cold because it might threaten them, And I think that I think there's something to mine in there, to compare our desacralization with the COVID reaction in mostly boomers who are mostly, they're terrified of death, and you can see that. So there's a spiritual vacuum going on, and there's a lot of people going in whichever way. I think that a lot of the progressive liberalism is a spiritual, not a spiritual, but it's a simulacra of spirituality that these people have adopted, even more hardcore and fanatical than your most fanatical Muslim in a way, Um, and so the pagans,
Interesting.
in a way, the pagans, I think that if they were to, look for the sacred, look for that, I think that any open-minded, honest pagan, if they start searching deep down in their belief system, will eventually just end up where all the other pagans in the past did, which is Christ. It's just how it's the end game. You know what I mean? There's a reason why, we don't know anything about paganism. It's not because, they'll say, oh, because we were forced or whatever. Well, you're telling me that a few dudes dressed in robes and like martyr women converted the great mighty Vikings, or these great like they can't make up their mind in a way when they talk about Christianity, right? On one hand, Christianity is this like cucked weak religion, and on the other hand, this cucked weak religion for women and slaves demolished all these like vicious Bronze Age tribes. So which one is it, dude? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you
Yeah.
can't be one or the other, right? If it
And
was a
it's
right,
and it's worse when you bring up like the Teutonic Knights who just utterly demolished tribe after tribe, pagan tribe after pagan tribe, and it just there was no fighting force like the Teutonic Knights up in the Baltics.
right,
And like the pagans gave it their all. They tried every trick in the book, but they could not match the steel of these great Germanic warriors.
until they lost it
And
to Saint Alexander Nevsky. But just sorry, I got to throw my ortho bro
and
score right there.
no, it's the truth. And what's even more interesting to me is just um, that a lot of these guys, when was the last time they went on a Viking raid? Hmm?
Hmm.
Hmm? Because,
Yeah,
if they're true pagans, they'll or true Vikings, they'd go out, make themselves a long ship, have their women make sails, and just, go raid, I don't know, Britain or like if they're on this side of the Atlantic, I don't expect them to cross the entire Atlantic, not without at least installing a toilet on their long
right.
ship. But
Yeah,
they should at least go down south, raid, I don't know, Brazil or the US, and then come back to Newfoundland and I don't know, or Greenland, considering they're far more Viking. So, but I don't see any of them doing that. So
right,
that's very disillusioning for me.
right,
None of them are doing none of them are really, what is it, the scourge of God or something.
right.
Um,
There's two major points, and I want to address them, and I want you guys' opinion. So please feel free to step in
Sure.
and
Yeah.
reply on that. Right? The first one that bothers me about a lot of the online, and I agree with Dave Green. There's really no point engaging in this because these guys don't have any like, and there is no real. I mean, there's people that will post like, oh, I'm into Astaru or whatever, and it's like I go to my, it's like that's cool. I respect that. I had somebody say, oh, I go to like my Shinto things. I'm like, okay, but when we're not talking about Shintoism here, like that's a state religion that has a state behind it. Okay, we're not talking about Japan's paganism, right? And somebody said to me like, would Japan be better off if it was Catholic? Actually, and I said, well,
it soon will be.
yes, and two, I think Japan would be better off if it was Orthodox because Orthodoxy actually suits the Japanese spirit very well, in my opinion. Because that's
Yeah,
how
it
they
might.
tend to. It's contemplative kind of like mysticism is it would be much more attractive to your average Japanese person. But Roman Catholicism had a great foothold in the southern part of Japan. But that's a different podcast, right? So one thing
Mm.
that they kind of mentioned that it's kind of always uh, irritates me slightly is they'll say, "Oh, I am, you are a Christ cuck because you have rejected the religion of your ancestors." And it's like, okay, dude, how about you just, first of all, I know my ancestors, right? You can look at my like DNA results. I've done my DNA test, right? And my DNA, even though that doesn't really go back all the way to your ancestors, it kind of shows where the people with similar DNA are found. It just says, the Carpathians, and then like the next kind of group of mine is like the Western, like the Northern Baltic areas and stuff, Western Russian, Northern Baltics. And
Oh, cool.
so, there's no mix in me, right? I'm not in any way like an American that I've got like seven different variations of like European. I'm one kind of European, and that's Eastern European, right? Um, But
Hmm.
if you,
What's interesting,
right, so when
I
people
was just
ask me
going to
like,
comment on,
what is the religion of your ancestors? Well, according to church, you know, accepted church history, Romania, where the Romanian people at that time, the Dacians, right, were Christian. Christianity was brought to them not through the sword, but through apostolic apologetics by Saint Luke, right? And he did this in like year 80, right? So that is, about 2,000 years worth of my ancestors being Orthodox, right? So
yeah.
yes, my some of my ancestors might have worshipped Zalmoxis as who was the Dacian god, um, who, throwing their firstborn onto spears and worshiping the thunder and that kind of stuff. Interesting enough, if you look at Conan's Crom, Zalmoxis is basically Crom, right? I
By
always
Crom.
yeah, that's basically, he was the god of thunder and caves, and he didn't care about you whatsoever. You know what I mean? He did not love or
Hmm.
do anything. He was just indifferent. Very much like Crom. I always feel like Conan, in a way, was more, he was a Chimerian, but I always felt like Robert Howard almost like looked at the Dacians and was like, that's where he, that's what he is, you know? So there's even a character called
Well,
something the Dacian in Conan, so I know that Robert Howard was familiar with the Dacians, but his personality is much more Dacian than Germanic, to be honest. But here's the thing, right?
I'll actually comment. Conan is not supposed to be Germanic.
Right,
Because Howard is of Irish descent, he was thinking of the Irish as well. So, but he
right. But
was familiar with Scythian history, so he was also thinking of the Scythians.
which were right
And
next to the Dacians, right?
yeah,
He kind of
yeah,
blended that, and like I said, I never felt that he had a Western Celtic kind of vibe. I think his other
I
character,
get that.
Brock Moore or whatever, was a lot more that that Celtic kind of persuasion.
Yeah, he was.
But anyways, so you say my ancestors. Well, so am I supposed to ignore 2,000 years of my ancestors? Right? I I'm Orthodox. My uncle is Orthodox. My dad was Orthodox before he passed away. My grandfathers were Orthodox. My great grandfathers were Orthodox, and I'm pretty sure all the way back to 80 AD, they're probably Orthodox of some variety or other. You can probably go further down if you wanted to, into the Eastern
Hmm.
Roman Empire. So I don't know, man. Am I supposed to just ignore those guys and worship what? A cartoon character variation of of Zalmoxis. Being from a region that has some pretty good archaeology, and there's a pretty decent amount of study on the Dacian god, and there's a lot of artifacts. And unlike a lot of the Germanic tribes, the Dacians had a written language, and there were settlements that were like town to city size. I mean, the entirety of the Trajan's column in Rome is about the two wars against the Dacians that eventually the Romans won and Romanized Dacia Minor. But I mean, should I just abandon the 2,000 years? Were all my ancestors in the last 2,000 years wrong, Mister Online Pagan? Should I ignore them? Should I ignore the baptisms, the graveyard? Should I ignore all that stuff because you on the internet are telling me? How ludicrous does that sound? And this applies for
It's a
Catholic
lot of
priestess.
us. Yeah, because like on my end, I'm of Franco-Scottish descent, and so like my ancestors all like 50% pretty much stemmed from the Rhineland and from primarily the Loire region. So like 50% from Loire, and the other 20% are basically from another 20% from the north of Ireland or the Ulster region and primarily Scotland. So, and they were all, well, with Scotland, they were baptized and Christianized with St. Columba coming in and many missionaries after him following. And so that when Scotland wasn't even united until the year 900, at which point it went from Pictland and Dalriada into Alba or Scotland. And Scotland, from the very beginning, was a Christian nation. And then you look at France, well, the Franc were not like the Merovingians under Merovee and whatnot. They worshipped a sea god we don't have much records of. And, then you fast forward to Clovis. Clovis ended up getting himself baptized around the time of 496, I believe. And this is when France is considered to have been founded. And France was always a Catholic nation. And so, like, there's no, like, with me, it's like 1500 years of Catholicism. This is the religion of my ancestors. They're like, I don't have any other cultural, you know what I mean?
Right.
Religious
Right. How far back are we
grouping to turn
supposed to
to.
go? Should we worship like
Yeah.
the deer god that the cavemen of Lascaux, painted or whatever? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
what wait,
I
should we
think I think
it's
part of it,
absurd.
yeah, I think part of it, what occurs to me as you guys are talking, like I'll share a little bit of my own background
Sure.
because I relate to what you guys are saying for sure. Like, the religion of my ancestors. But before I get to that, when it comes to pagan folks, in my mind, I think there should be a sharp divide between the online LARP, which
Hmm.
is, in
Weird.
my mind, it's really being done for a political purpose, which is some
Hmm.
vague, which in my mind, as far as I can tell, is some vague sense of white solidarity in the in the spirit of fighting their perceived enemies, whether it's the Jews or the blacks or whatever the hell they're on about. A lot of it strikes me as like pagan QAnon. Like
Right.
Hmm.
that's kind of how it seems to me.
It
I
is.
imagine that I feel like there have probably been. I mean, look, I've lived all over the country. I've been around, right, and I've run into my share of the Renaissance fair folk. And it strikes me that there were probably at least a few who were properly pagan, but they didn't tell you anything about it because it wasn't your fucking business. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
Like
fine.
it's the guys were like there's a spiritual or almost druidic continence to their presence, but like they don't have to say anything. You know what I mean? And they wouldn't because it's not my business. So that's kind of my own.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I'll also say that I have very little experience with this. This is just kind of being, I'm reaching back into my own memory of mist and time. But that said, I think it is honestly a response to the shattering of American society since the end of the Cold War, where this purpose, right? Liberal democracy is one, and now liberal democracy is engaging in its mopping up actions, and that's why you saw like the rise of the atheist right and this and that. Year, not the atheist right, but like the new atheist stuff. And you saw all these things, and it's kind of a response to the exhaustion of 20th century ideology. So, I mean, that said, it would be interesting to have conversations with people who, if there's anybody who is properly, thoughtfully pagan. I can think of a couple names, maybe, but anybody who's properly really thought about this stuff and tell them, like, hey, my ancestors, for example, on my father's side, they're pilgrims, and I can trace them all the way back to the original pilgrim migrations. And those are Church of England separatists, and they came to North America, like, so that's a specific heritage. And that's a choice that, I mean, in my mind, it seems, for lack of a better term, straight up sinful to deny the choice they made. Like they gave up major stuff to come here. So I'm not gonna like go
Yeah.
back or any of that shit. Like, nope, this is it. This is home. So be it. And
Right.
then on my mother's side, it's Irish Catholics. And that's the church I was baptized in when I was little. My parents decided to baptize me Catholic, and that's what you did. And there's this strong sense of this is how it is. This is how it works. Like there wasn't even any question what church they were going to be married in or what church I was going to be baptized in. Like we're Catholic. This is where you go. We're Irish Catholic, eh? Especially in Cleveland of all places. You know what I mean? Where that's a major part of that ethnic group's identity. That said, I fully acknowledge myself as a bit of a mutt, you know, and but I'm American. Like in what respect are we not mutts? In what respect are we not trying to figure out what we are because where we come from is such a diverse background. I mean, in comparison with you, Alex, like you're born in fucking Romania, man. You're
I am.
Orthodox. Like that's what you are, and that's fantastic. That's amazing. I've got this mutt thing I've got to deal with, and I know the answer is not paganism because my family's left Europe. And the Irish Catholic side, yeah, definitely not fucking converting back to that stuff. Absolutely not. My grandmother would come out of the grave and beat me senseless. Absolutely, I'm way more afraid of her than any of the old Celtic gods. Believe you me. You know what I
Right.
mean? So,
Yeah.
and that's fine though because I love her, and she was my grandma, so it's fine. But these are the thoughts I have. I think it's probably in some ways an honest response, but like so many things, including a lot of Christian cultures, especially the Protestant side of things, it's wrapped up in the fake and gay online world. So it's just shut up, retard,
Well,
to
Yeah.
bring it back. But I
well,
don't know. What do you guys think?
no. So it's interesting,
Well,
and because you actually
I
there's a
think,
go ahead because you're the guest, man. Go ahead and talk.
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
sorry.
You
I was
you
going to
get
say,
precedence over
as
me.
for the, oh, sorry. As for the mutt thing, I was going to say, I hear this a lot from some Americans and even some Anglophones I know. And I wasn't sure where, like, I was on that, whether I was a mutt or not. But our family always told us, well, we're Franco-Scottish. So then, we did the DNA test and we knew it was affirmation more than, it affirmed what we were. So, and the French and the Scots are both Celtic people. So, um, on that point, I may not like be able to understand on one level what it's like to be the mutt because, it's pretty much pure Celt over here, but I can at least sympathize and simply, you know, well, depending on where you are in the US, I could say like, well, you know, well, South Carolina, that's pretty Appalachian, so that'd probably be like pretty Celtic there. So, um, on that level, I might be able to relate better to you as a person than say, um, some of the people I know from Ohio and Michigan because they are so far removed from like Celtic culture, from anything like that. Because my family was very much traditionalist. So, like, I understand how, when Don Harper Jr. sends me music or discusses this Celtic story or that French linguistic term, I understand and relate better to that than I do, let's say, someone from Germany. While I'm friendly with a lot of Germans, I don't understand them as easily as I might say used to, just on the basis of that common blood connection and culture and whatnot.
Yeah,
So I do understand also.
being from Northeast North America, I think whether it's French, English, Irish, or any other mix thereof, it does have a lot more in common than say German. I uh
Yeah.
I see what you mean. Like especially with Canadians, like I'll have a much more just because we're all around the Great Lakes, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and getting with like Germans, yeah, I'll kind of get it, but like it feels a little foreign. I got to be honest, it feels a little foreign
Yeah.
to me now that I think about it. Not in like a bad way, just
They're
like
pretty awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah,
awesome, but it's just it's weird. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's fair to say.
Well, so here's two asides. Actually, one quick aside and then one point that I really want to talk about, right? The
All right,
first
go
thing
for it.
is, I go to an Orthodox church, right? But
Mhm.
I specifically and happily go to an OCA church. And for you non-Orthodox guys, the OCA is the Orthodox Church in America, which is actually an American Orthodox church. I do not go to a Romanian Orthodox church or a Russian Orthodox church. I go to the American Orthodox Church, and I specifically was happy to find one, and I'm happy to go to it, even though there actually is some Greek Orthodox churches around, because I am not an American by birth, but I am a naturalized American, and I've made America my home, so I want to go worship around my American neighbors. And while there's I would say maybe less than 10% of the people that attend my church are European. The majority of them are Americans and Southerners. My priest is a Southerner from Georgia, and the majority of the people are, um, surprisingly, a good percentage of them are lifetime Orthodox Christians whose parents or grandparents converted uh, early on. And then there's a significant amount of, converts in the last decade or so. And what I like about it is that it is an American church, and its traditions that it follows come from Saint Herman of Alaska, who brought Orthodoxy to the United States. It was brought through Alaska, through the Russians, and it trickled its way down south and finally all the way to the east. So that's a big thing to me. It's something that I actually find very important to make sure that I go to an American church. Um, but I wanted to ask a question, and this is a question I'm going to put to you guys, but I want to put it out to everybody out there because I think that what I'm about to say is something that we really need to discuss. And the question is, when does somebody become a native, right? When does it become your land, right? Because, all right, most of the nations, political nations for example, Europe are pretty new compared to the United States. But Americans, your descendants, Fisto, for example, have been
Yeah.
here since the 1600s, since 1601 or something like that, right? Since Jamestown was founded. I don't know. I'm not that great with American history dates, but since Jamestown, right? So, how many generations of some people's families have lived on this land, have toiled this soil, have fed themselves from this soil, have been protected, have built their houses, their homes from the trees that grow on this American soil, have built the villages, the towns, the cities, and have had children, have had grandchildren, great grandchildren, all the way to 2025, since 1601. At one point, do we stop considering these people outsiders and not American? When does it become your land? All right. Because we tend to, we tend to, have this kind of concept, and a lot of the paganism stuff comes from this too, right? How long does a people have to be in a place and have a specific belief system to where that becomes the native belief, right? The pagans always talk about, Rome this, Rome is great, but the Romans themselves are not from northern Italy, right? They came, their mythology is that they came from Greece into, in the whole story with you know,
Troy.
the rape of the Sabines and that type of thing, right? And the founders of Rome. So they weren't originally from that land, from that soil, but nobody is going to say that, a Roman in the year, 10 AD is not a Roman and that wasn't his land and his soil, right? The Romans considered their uh, their Gaulish subjects to become Roman, and that was their soil, or they're Spanish, they're from their Anatolian area, like they had emperors from
Hmm.
that area. Marcus Aurelius was from what did they call Spain back then? Uh,
Spania.
even before that,
Oh, but
the
even before Spain?
Or there's Iberia.
Yeah.
Iberia.
Iberians and stuff,
Iberia,
right?
there you go.
Right? And so they became Romans, right? So when are we going to consider Americans, like, that can trace back their descendants all the way to like the Jamestown or the Mayflower, or even, the first 100 years, who shaped this land, who built this land? When do we consider them American? And how dare we do not? I think it's time to stop calling the Native Americans Native Americans. I think they should be called American Indians, right? And we need to get rid of this whole concept of, listen, if you've been here for multiple generations, you belong here. It is your land. If you know what I mean? That's what I think. I think we need to have that conversation because what are we going to, is it going to be 3000 AD? And you're going to have people go, well, you guys are immigrants to your land, until when, like what's the cutoff point, guys? Where's that point where you go, you know what? I know nothing else, and I have no connection anymore to the place where my, forefathers do, right? I mean, the British, right? That what we consider, the English, our Anglo-Saxons and Normans for the most part, right? Do we consider them like, do we tell the British go back to, to freaking, the East, right? Where you came from on your longboats and stuff, right? No, that's their land. So when do Americans get to own America spiritually and significantly, the country that they built? I don't know. That's my opinion as a foreigner. Okay. What do you guys think about that?
I'd say, well, my perspective is as a someone whose ancestors got here in probably the 16th century, because Quebec was Nouvelle-France and it was founded in 1534. So this is considered in some ways the founding uh, date of Quebec in Canada. So, um, but the thing is, the Quebecois consider very much Quebec and Canada to be, ours. So when people come along and say, well, you're just immigrants, the usual response is to snort and go, yeah, okay, whatever. Fuck off, retard, basically. And I think with the US, it's a little more difficult because technically New England, which is what was the predecessor to America, dates back to almost the same era as Nouvelle-France, because Nouvelle-France and New England so engaged in the same kind of conflicts that um, divided England and France. But in turn, um, Jamestown, for its part, was founded in 1607, I believe. And this is also a good date. But at this point, Americans have been in North America for so damn long that the entire conversation is moot, like you said. It's just um like this is basically, like this is basically our land at this point. We conquered it, we own it, and we've lived it and bred on it and toiled on it and died on it for half a millennium. Like at this point, we have as much claim to it as you pointed out, as the Romans in the year like 10 AD had to Rome. And on Rome, here's the thing. What a lot of the pagan LARPers are forgetting is the actual history of Rome. Rome didn't just fall, but it also morphed. And it morphed into the Roman Catholic Church and into the Eastern Orthodox Church via Constantinople, because, the second Rome was Constantinople. So, these two Romes morphed and changed and became more than just brick and mortar. And as St. Augustine points out, the city of God in a way. And so, uh, well, this is what a German professor who's a friend of mine told me at one point. Rome is an idea now. So this is something that people often forget. It's not just a city anymore, it's an idea. So, like what we French tend to say is that we are Roman in a way because we were born from a mixture of Romanness, well, the Roman Empire and Celtic Celtic people and a Germanic tribe all melding together to found France. And but in turn, a lot of people in the East regard themselves as more Roman because, there's that natural heritage for the Eastern Empire. So this whole, well, what about Rome? Actually, Rome's kind of on our side because, that's our heritage as Christians, because many of us are probably descended from Romans.
Right.
I don't
I
know.
mean,
That's just my point.
as an Eastern European, both my religion and my people are, what historians would call the Byzantine Empire, which is not really a correct terminology because the Byzantine is not a word that anybody,
Call it Greek Empire.
yeah, it was the Eastern Roman Empire, and they considered themselves Roman up until the fall of Constantinople, which was
Hell yeah, brother.
a long
Sorry,
time
I get
ago.
excited.
I did a quick little bit of Googling, right? Just dates because I'm never been great with dates, but
But
from the founding of Rome, which was 700 something BC, to 44 BC, which was the death of Julius Caesar, right? That's about 700 years,
Hmm.
right? Um, so
Yeah.
would anybody not consider Julius Caesar a Roman? Would somebody not consider the ground he stood on his land, right? Yet
Very good point.
we're approaching that year in about 100 years. We're going to be as same distance from the founding of Rome to Julius Caesar's death than from the first, European colonists in North America, So we need to put that into perspective. We need to tell these people to shut the fuck up, basically, because it is our, and well, your guys's, right? It's
Well,
your
I
home.
think
Yeah.
I think the example with Julius Caesar is well made, only because the reason nobody questions the fact he was Roman is because he beat the ever living shit out of every other culture that was even within like spitting distance.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Rome had
And then
vanquished everybody.
and
And in
then
my mind,
and then
when yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and then his adoptive son went and did it too.
Yes.
Because
And
why
then
not?
so
Family
because
tradition.
they were Roman because they had triumphed over their enemies and they were the superior culture. Flat out. That's
Yep.
it. Get fucked. So when
Yep.
Krynn was talking, I was thinking to myself, we become Americans when Saint J.D. Vance ascends the throne and drives the liberal democratic hordes into the ocean. That's when we become American. Like we the cultures are in conflict. The cultures are in nearly open civil war. Some would argue we're already in there. So really, there's a victory that has to be won before I think maybe this conversation, the war is the conversation.
Right.
Mm.
Well,
Well,
and
what's interesting to me is also that when it comes to, I was gonna just comment on the Greek thing. The reason I call the Eastern Empire, I call it the Eastern Empire. I call it Eastern Roman Empire or Romanoi, because that was a term to describe the Greeks at one point. I've also called it the Greek Empire, but I call it that because I'll be honest, I love the Greeks, and I consider the Eastern Empire to be just pure Greek manifest destiny, just um, maxing itself out, like just uh, fulfilling what it was doing back before Rome conquered Greece. It's just, going around conquering, beating the ever-loving shit out of everyone, or otherwise just holding its ground for 1,000 years almost. And
Yeah.
people do not respect the Greeks enough. And like even medieval Greece, which is an empire, should get more study, get more respect, because it was the buckler of Christendom. And if the if we say like the Crusaders were the sword, Greece was the buckler. It shielded, it protected, it nourished Christendom. And so when I say Greek Empire, I say that with the utmost admiration and even love, because
You're talking
I
about
grew up on Greek
Alexander's
story.
empire. You're talking about Alexander's vibe, not the original
But
Caesar.
Greek,
you know?
yeah, but Greek manifest destiny is a thing. It's still a
Yeah.
thing with Justinian. It's still a thing with Heraclitus.
Yeah.
It's still a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Comneno.
Yeah.
They're all
I
awesome.
was thinking of Justinian too. I mean, that guy for for me, it's when it comes to the greatest Roman between Justinian and Caesar, flip a coin, man. I don't even know.
Augustus.
I got
He's the true Caesar.
right.
Yeah, but if it wasn't for the Hagia Sophia, the Hagia Sophia is what pushes Justinian into the
Oh,
goddamn
okay.
legend. Just
Right.
the
Fair.
absolute physical manifestation of his triumph. Like,
But what lowers him is just the burning and the sacking and destruction of Italy
that's fair. But I mean,
and
it's
Bessarion.
Belisarius. What do you want,
Bessarion.
right?
Right. But
Belisarius. It's like,
It's Belisarius. What do you want, man?
here's some more.
You
Here's
do
some
what you
more.
do.
Here's some more perspective on time, right? So, we can
mhm,
say pretty, safe and roughly that the Roman Empire started in 27 BC, right, with Augustus, right? That's when the
mhm.
Republic fell and there was the wars, and then 27 BC with Augustus, right? Um,
Yep.
I think every historian will fully agree that what's called the Byzantine Empire is the straight continuation of the Roman Empire. Well, the Byzantine Empire,
Yeah.
the last Roman emperor, did not fall until 1453, right? So
Yep.
Hmm.
Constantine the
Constantinople,
11th, my man,
right?
my man.
Constantinople fell on the 29th
Yeah.
of May, 1453, right? We need to do an episode to to lament that and pray to God
Yeah.
for the restoration of Constantinople from the heathen Saracens, right, and the Ottomans.
We why?
Um,
Yeah, we
may,
have
may
to.
God will it in the future, right?
Yes,
Um,
right.
all right.
God wills it.
No, it will. It will come back because
Yep,
God will
it
strike down
must.
all the unbelievers, and eventually that land will be Christian again. It's just, and I have a feeling the Russians will do it.
Constantine the 12th, let's go.
Right. But so we're talking
Yep.
about over 1,000, almost 1,500 years,
Yeah, it's
right?
almost 2000.
All
It's
right.
absurd.
Now,
Yeah, it's absurd.
now, Saint Constantine, right, converted to Christianity in the year 350. Right, so he converted the Romans to Christianity in 350. So from 350 to 1453, the Roman Empire was Christian, right? We are talking a long freaking time, right? So when people say, oh, the Romans were pagans, well, the Romans were pagans for a very short time of their existence. The majority of their time, they were absolutely Christian, right? That's a long time of
Yeah.
Christianity that the Romans, people that call themselves the Romans. But then you can have a pick and go, well, no, 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 those weren't the real Romans. What I'm talking about is the senators, the ones we learned about in middle school, who, it's like, shut up. You know what I mean? Right?
You could
Um,
push it, you could push it even further and say that, even though Constantinople fell in 1453, then you had the Holy Roman Empire in Germany and the Orthodox Church in Russia both claim the mantles of Rome. I mean,
right.
Russia considers itself the third Rome,
Right. I mean,
so
they're
it's
called
like,
czars
But
for a reason, which is the Russian word
yeah,
for
man.
Caesar,
So it's
right?
like,
And
this is
want to know
this is how
something
when Krynn
else?
said it turns into an idea. Roman is an idea. Like
Yep.
it's hard
But
to hold
there's
a candle
something
to that,
more.
man. Yeah,
There's also,
exactly.
do you want to know something funny? Charlemagne is also considered a founding father to France. And for a long time, there was the belief France is also the third Rome because through Charlemagne. So you have Germany, France, and Russia all saying, "No, I'm France. No, I'm Roman. I am Rome."
Yeah.
And so it is an idea.
Right.
Um, and it's one that, um, who has the greatest claim? Well, I think France, but it's one of those things where it's up in the air.
Yeah.
And it's just it might sound strange, but I don't much think about that stuff too often.
Right. It's
Uh,
often kind of pendatic and like autistically historian-y, but it's still funny in the context of this conversation. Um,
yeah,
right.
Yeah,
But
but
it's incredible to realize that we're living in the aftermath of Rome and the fall of Constantinople,
right.
both in the
uh,
East and in the West. I mean, that's crazy.
it's a
Right.
Like,
tragedy.
it's just, man, one of the biggest moments in
We got to
world history right
restore.
there.
We got to restore at least one of them. And since the West, certain countries like Spain, France, Britain, Germany are all interesting, and they are what they are now. It just means we just have to restore it in the East. We got to restore it somewhere. Let's just restore it in the East because why not? Greece would be happy, and everybody wants to make the Greeks happy. Um,
I feel like we're gonna
well,
get a Russian commenter going, Moscow, is that just a joke to you?
Right. I tend to be
yes, it is. I'm
I
joking.
tend to be partial to that one, okay? Uh while I
I'm
enjoy the
joking.
Greeks, they're a little bit too interbred with the Ottomans nowadays. Um
Fair,
unfortunately, like uh
unfortunately.
so there's that element, right? The other element, the one that bothers the other man, we've completely derailed this conversation, but I think it's interesting,
It's
right?
amazing. Yeah, no,
Um,
this is fantastic.
uh, some people are like, "Oh my
I
God, I
blame
thought they were going to
people.
talk about fantasy fiction, not like the Byzantine
I was
Empire."
hoping for that.
Yeah, we will. We've got plenty of time. I'm in this quick,
Okay.
okay? Um, because I'm going to actually tie this next thing into fantasy fiction, right? So
Oh, that's amazing.
when people say our pagan friends, right, will say, well, the real Europeans are like, they worship the rocks at Stonehenge and like druids or whatever, or like, whatever the hell. Um, that's not true. I don't feel like that's true. I feel like that Europe, the ideal Europe is Christian Europe, right? And I reject
Yeah.
the Age of Enlightenment that fetishizes pre-Empire Rome, right? In lieu of the High Middle Ages, which I think are some of the ideal uh, philosophical, historical like eras of Europe, right? Which where, if you were to be honest, that's where our fantasy fiction is a direct, descendant out of, right? And the
Yeah.
Arthurian myths, for example. And what I think, and I made this a point when I made that like solo podcast where I talked about how I think that uh, Beauty and the Beast is the quintessential European story. I don't know if you guys got a chance to listen to that,
Love that episode.
right?
Yeah,
I
I got to
think,
listen to a good chunk of it. I thought
right.
it was very interesting what you
Oh,
what you
it's
did.
the best podcast I ever heard.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, for people that haven't listened to it, I recommend listening to it. It's apologetics for Beauty and the Beast, right? But what it's really about is apologetics for my love of Europe, right? And how I think that story, not the Disney movie, but that story, that it's a French story originally, really
La Belle et la
illustrates
Bite.
yeah, it really illustrates the ideal Christian European mindset, right? Which is the beast tamed by the Christian beauty, the virgin, the holy virgin, basically, is what we have going on, right? And the ideal Christian man is a violent beast that is tamed by good, but doesn't become weak or cowardly, right? Because you look at all the historical tribes and people, the Mongols, all of them. Every people has vicious, violent men, right? The Bronze Age, BAP kind of mentality, right? Of like the pirate and the thief and that kind of stuff. But you know what? Nobody wants to live in a world of the Aztecs, right? Where they were sacrificing
No.
thousands of children a day, Nobody wants to live in the
And
world of
eating
the
people.
Mongols because, after all, right, they couldn't even preserve their own history. Everything they did has turned to ash. The only reason we know about them is because we save their history. You know what I mean? They built nothing and have nothing, right? None of these like violent, great warriors leave anything behind, right? It's only the Europeans that have left long-lasting beauty and truth, and a lot of it comes from this blend of a martial spirit tamed, right? Tamed by love of beauty and love of man, all right? And love of the divine, all right? And because if you have just violence, well, you're just a brute. You're no different than a Neanderthal. Then our ideal should just be savages, right? If you think that might makes right, this Nietzschean kind of mindset, right? Then the kind of people that we tend to hate, which is criminals, pirates, just disgusting rapists and stuff, well, that's our ideal because that's who wins, right? But we don't love those people, right? We love Faramir from the Lord of the Rings, right? I think the most European and the most Christian thing, right, is that line from Lord of the Rings, the Faramir line. That what is it? Do not love. I don't love the sword for or whatever. You can probably quote it better than me. Do you know what I'm talking
It's
about?
where yeah, he says I do not love the sword for its splendor or something, uh, or for its ability to uh like claim honor, something to that effect. And then he says, I love it for that which it protects. And he says this very tenderly and very sincerely to Sam and Frodo. And even as he tells them that he would never accept the One Ring, which is symbolic of sin itself and of the inner darkness within men. It's the great dark con of man, but it's also, in a way, the last. It contains a part of the spirit and essence of Sauron. So, it's a bit of sin itself. It's the devil himself in a way. And he
Right.
says, I would not touch that for all the wealth in Middle Earth. And this is really um, like the sword for what it loving the sword for what it protects is, as you said, the most Christian thing imaginable. But the truly ascend like the Christian who has truly ascended to wisdom and reconciled himself fully to God will be the one who can turn away the One Ring,
Right.
like Sam, Bilbo, and Frodo, and not Frodo, Faramir do. Frodo could not, so it broke him. And ultimately, Frodo returns, but he's kind of broken and shattered by the fact that he gave in to temptation at the last minute. Not that anyone could judge him because no one could have resisted Sauron, or I should say, the One Ring within Mount Doom, because that's where it's strongest.
Right. Right. The exact quote is, I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its
Mm.
swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend. You know?
Yep.
And I think it's important to realize, and this is something that is, truly, in my opinion, a Christian belief, is that yes, through ages of ages, we will build great cities and magnificent empires, but they will all turn to dust, no matter what. And in
Mhm.
the end, the only thing that will remain is the love of God, our salvation, and the love of our families and the people around us in our community. It's it's
Mhm.
meaningless to have all the wealth and power and treasure. It's all empty if you don't have the love of the people around you and the love of God. It's everything. You're never going to build the perfect society, and that's why any
No.
belief system like communism that progressivism that tries to build a perfect world is always going to fail, no matter what good intentions they have, because it is impossible to build a good, perfect society in a fallen world. It won't ever happen.
Yeah.
Even Gondor will fall and turn to dust, and it's just how it is, and it's how it's going to be until the end of all time. And
Well,
that's why we need to
this
focus on love and the truth.
Yeah. And this is also what people forget is just to go to Conan for a minute, Robert E. Howard was a Christian. And how does he start his Conan stories? He starts with the destruction of the Hyborian Age and of Aquilonia, which is the state, which is basically his Gondor. So he starts his story with the destruction of all the kingdoms, showing that everything Conan builds, like everything Conan has done, in the end turns to dust. And why was that? Well, because nothing in this fallen world ever really lasts.
Right.
And this is something that it might sound strange, but fantasy authors, at least of Tolkien, Howard, Lewis, Lloyd Alexander, their generation understood. Um, the genre, like, well, we're basically these stories are supposed to be our current modern day continuation of medieval literature and folklore. So, like Beauty and the Beast, in a way, at least on a, I guess, linguistic or maybe literary level, is nearer to like Lord of the Rings or what I write than they are to say, I don't know, they're they're a direct continuation of that. They're closer to that than they are to say Jane Austen stuff, because Jane Austen was writing about what women were worrying about in the 1790s or 1820s or whatever,
Right.
and about gossiping about men and just debating, statues and whatnot. But fantasy literature is really all about continuing with folklore and mythology and whatnot, and putting it in a European context or Christendom context, I guess. But like these stories are ultimately pagan, but they're meant to be like a precursor to what comes after. Like Tolkien's Middle Earth is supposed to be the ancient Earth before the flood. Same with the Hyborian Age. So this used to be how they did it. So it's a direct prequel in a way to the stories that, you know, would become history in the Bible and whatnot. So this is, but yeah, so like these stories are very much at the same time in literary history, a follow-up to the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, the Chanson de Roland, and all this. And this is something that I have noticed a lot of authors tend to forget, but that's a different can of worms, I guess.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah, Beauty and the Beast, people underestimate the importance of it, and even Faramir over the
right.
genre.
Well, I think that the two important like key points in Lord of the Rings, and honestly, there's a lot of important key points in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
And for people that have read it, or first of all, the movies are good, but the movies are not great. You really get the richness
you
of
got to
it.
read the
You
book.
have to read it. But I actually, I recommend the audiobook for a lot of people. I read it, of course, many years ago, and
It's
then I
quite good.
listened to the audiobook, and I don't know what it is about hearing it. It almost reminds me of it. It feels like you're sitting, next to a campfire, and Bilbo is reading
Mm,
his book to you, and the narrator sings the songs, and
yeah.
it really captures that like almost like oral history kind of element of it, and I really
Mm,
enjoyed the audiobook. But I think
I
the
love
two
them.
key, the two key elements is the Faramir quote and another one. And I think, in my opinion, the hinge, like the most important action in the Lord of the Rings, the greater Tolkien saga, is actually in The Hobbit, right? And that is the scene, the moment where Bilbo spares Gollum's life. When he's in a cave and he's invisible because he's put on a ring, and Gollum is spazzing out, he's chimping out, he's looking for, and Bilbo walks up to him, and he has these thoughts, and I can't quote it exactly, but he's like, I should strike down this wretched creature, this wretched, vile, murderous monstrosity, And he goes, he raises a sword, he has Sting in his hand, and he's about to just, yeet the crap out of Gollum. And he doesn't. He shows mercy. He spares him, and he leaves the cave, and then he meets up with the dwarves, right? But that right there is the key moment because we all know, spoiler alert, right? It is Gollum that brings the final destruction of the ring, right? Through this kind of divine, moment of mercy from Bilbo, it sets the entire story in movement. Everything happens because of that, moment, and I always found that interesting when I noticed it. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was the key thing in the book. The fact that Gollum is the one that ends up saving everybody at the end, much to Frodo's chagrin.
Right.
It's if you miss that, you miss the entire point of the story. And that's in my mind when it becomes the most Christian, the most Catholic, where, God humbles himself to be a mere man born in a shithole. And, you know, this is the thing that hit me this year that really led me to complete my prodigal journey. All the triumphs of Rome, all the triumphs of the emperors, and some bum born in a stable somewhere goes, "Yeah, hold my beer and watch this. Hey, Caesar, is your cave empty? Yeah, I didn't think so. I mean, holy shit, right?" So Gollum is a huge expression of that. This wretched little creature. Well, careful, because you don't know what that thing's going to be able to do. And I mean, you see this over and over again in life. The idea that popped into my mind is little wretched creatures doing incredible things. Audie Murphy in World War II. right? Like this little dude, asthmatic, right? Hulks out and becomes one of the most famous war heroes in American history. Like, guys, you gotta you gotta watch out for what a really, what a really humble, pissed off human can do.
Right, right. Well, so now to continue on this trend, right? I'm actually going to take one of the questions from our listeners, right?
Oh
Uh,
man, this is a
Mr.
streak now.
No, yeah, we do. That's twice. This is number two. We've done this.
Number two, baby.
And number
Let's
two, right?
go.
So on a comment thread, Josef Hirsch, who is an old time listener and commenter, he asks, and this is one for you, and that's why I'm picking this one. He goes,
Uh-oh.
not for you, Pithisto, but
Oh, good.
Mr. Krynn for Joe. Now,
You're up, boy.
right wing art and how to balance religion and art. What should be as opposed to what is. So, well, I guess what he's
Mm.
saying is, how do you, as a writer, a fantasy connoisseur and a promoter, how do we deal with the idea of right wing art and balancing religion and art in it? And that's a question that gets asked a lot. Like, there's no such thing as right wing art or good right wing art. You know, we get that nonsense all the time. So, what do you say to that, man?
Well, um, I tend to emphasize I'm a nationalist monarchist these days, so but and somehow people say, well, that sounds right wing to me. But I've been grouped in with the right, so whatever. But as far as right wing art goes, mine, I guess, is right wing art, and I would say that the thing is, I don't think about politics when I'm writing. Actually, a lot of times when I'm writing, no one's more surprised than I am because my brain is thinking about history while I'm listening to music or to audiobooks, and I'm just writing. And the words appear on the screen or in my notebooks, and then like when I stop writing, I blink and I'm going, what the hell happened here? So it's like a trance. So it's very much um, like something's working through me, like I'm some sort of conduit. So in terms of uh, of the politics, I'm not thinking about that. But when it comes to the religious elements, um, that's where I tend to try to strike more a philosophical point with each story. So let me see. Uh, the story I went the broadest with my like moralizing or my philosophies was Brotherhood of the Gemstone, which was an attempt at a Scottish Lord of the Rings. But at the same time, I wanted to have the idea of Scottish values, so family and freedom, of course, or freedom. But uh, there was, but there was ultimately a lot of other stuff that crept in. But it was also meant to be a Catholic story, but I put it in the background. Like I backed it up. Like I'm like, whoa, whoa, back it up, back it up. I don't want it in the foreground because if you put your faith in the foreground, you become a moralizing busybody, a nag. Whereas if you put it in the background, people won't mind it as much. But each story, like the Heracles story. I love the story of Heracles. So I'm still working hard on it. It's just this is a hard story to write. I have to always try to make sure every paragraph is perfect, and I often rewrite the same paragraph 4 times, sometimes 8 times. But that story is about redemption, so I don't need to insert any real Catholic stuff. But in that case, I focus on the theme of redemption. Can a man be redeemed and saved from this deep rage within him? And at the same time, like Aeolus, his nephew, is his kick in a lot of stories. So I'm putting in a bit of a father-son kind of bond between them. So there's also the theme of fatherhood, and this is very important to me. Um, so each story, I tend to put a different philosophical point to it. So you might have, for another story, um, let me think. Uh, well, there's Bear and Cub, where it's about fathers and sons, and you have um, which one did I complete? Oh, Remus and Wilhelm, where can a underdog, can someone who's like a scrawny little nerd become a great war hero and knight? Well, yeah. So that's about can you rise above what you were? Can you become more than what you are and become great? Like when is it too late for you to achieve greatness? Well, never. So I like to just put a philosophical point. And I've noticed that a lot of the fantasy stories I love them for world building, which is my main passion. World building is everything to me. But when I write a certain story, and I've noticed when I'm reading the stories on Substack, those I like the most are rife with philosophy. Like just even if they only put one philosophical point, I love it. Like they don't, you might be able to extract other ideas from it, but they put like one main idea in there. So like I love Marcus Aurelius, so I might read him and I say, "Oh, that's a good point." And I just take one sentence and I turn that into the inspiration for an entire story. And I go from there. Like everything you do will come around to you in a full circle. That's he has a quote related to that. So I kind of have that as and also an idea within the Heracles novel. So like everything's coming around always full circle to smack Heracles in the back of the head, or sometimes whether it's good or evil. And so um, like this is how I kind of approach it when it comes to right-wing art. I look more at philosophy because art to me is more downstream from philosophy and from God. So I need to approach it not from a moralizing point of view, but from an exploration. I'm exploring something. I'm crossing the Atlantic to stick the flag of the French kings into the land. And I'm saying, okay, so, like I crossed this whole fucking pond. Here I am. I have no idea how I got here. I'm just putting the banner here and I'm saying, this is mine now. It's kind of like that. So I'm exploring. And I might say, like, here's this one ex philosophical thread or thought I'm exploring. But along the way, I'm zigzagging all over, and I might explore other points and ideas. So that's how I'd say right-wing art should be. It should be philosophical. You're exploring not just the universe around you and the meaning of things in life, but you're exploring the inner universe within you. It's an internal and external journey. And God plays a hand in that, but you put him in the background, like Tolkien and even Howard did. Well, Howard put him a bit more into the foreground of Mitra, the great god who's protecting humanity and helping out. But I would argue it's preferable to put it in the background, um, like how Tolkien did it. And even some 80s writers did that. They put, in terms of fantasy, put the divine in the background so that, the characters and the philosophy has full room to, move without having to turn to dad for everything. So I hope that's a good answer. But I tend to think because of the philosophical connotations, this is contrary to the left. Because the thing with left-wing art is it's all liberalistic nonsense. Whereas right-wing art should be pre-modern. So like at least with fantasy. So like fantasy is very philosophical because it's the spirit of truth, and we all know who the spirit of truth is. But fantasy should be pre-modern, so it needs to be closer to Arthuriana from like the 12th or 13th century, like Chrétien de Troyes. It should be closer to that or the Norse sagas or the Roman and Greek epics. So you need to explore that stuff while, like I'll use the term Byzantines, intermingling it with, that Christian spirit to arrive at this very philosophical, rich world you're creating. That's how I tend to look at fantasy and when I'm writing and whatnot. And
That's a good
because
answer,
every
man.
story is supposed to be thanks.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Current, yeah. So like in each now I also like to intermingle like recently I like more doing this more and more. I like intermingling more and more Celtic elements into my stories. Or for my Japanese stories, I make it more Japanese, but they're like honorary Celts in the minds of the French. But I've got a German story I've got planned, and I'm writing it in French, and it's just putting myself in the head of the Germans is very hard, but it's very fun. And I've plans for a Bulgarian story and more Greek stories, but that's further down the road. But I am detecting even in those stories a Celtic Fred. So because you can't escape what you are. So that's the thing. Like uh, fantasy is also about nationalism. It's about nations and about tribe. So like Aquilonia or Gondor, they have, their nations that have fallen on hard times, and they need Aragorn slash Conan to come to the rescue. So you have a genre that you also have to look at it as you're glorifying a nation. You're giving it a mythology or a great romance. Is there anything even remotely as glorious as that? Like, is there like in 1,000 years, people will still read Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion and still say, "My gosh, that Tolkien guy, he was awesome. This was the great epic. This was the English Homer." And maybe in a few centuries, someone will write a sequel that will be worthy, like Virgil did for Homer. But that's how I kind of look at it. Too many authors, like especially on the left, go, well, we need to flatten this genre. We need to like put lattes in it. No, you got to take the lattes out and you got to put the nationalism in. Because, people want to see guys thumping each other with swords and taking down dragons, but they want to see them, they want to hear them belt out that great poem, a red day, a sword day, and whatnot, that Theoden shouts out. Because that's my favorite part in The Lord of the Rings. That's the part that really ties it together for me. It's because, um, well, my dad loved the Lord of the Rings movies, and I think he read the book. But ultimately, Theoden and my dad have a lot in common personality. So I think when I first read that, I thought of my dad a lot, and because he was a very hot-headed, hot-tempered guy, and but ultimately, if he was called to serve, he would have probably happily run forward with a sword in hand, because he was very Celtic. He's where we get a lot of our French blood, really. So there's that element in there. And to me, Faramir, with that one scene about where he talks about the sword that protects, Theoden, who talks about the sword day, a red day, and, singing his way into battle and whatnot. These are what I think of when I look at the genre as well. This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to glorify our home country, our people, because Tolkien's basically saying, look how awesome we English are. Nothing compares with us. Well, Howard is basically saying with his Conan story, oh yeah, well, nothing compares with my people. And we've kind of lost sight of that because of liberalism, which has kind of poisoned the well, because it says, well, you can't be glorious because we're all equal. We're all the same, when really we're not. And fantasy should be glorifying, you know, our home people and our tribe, like, and saying, look how fucking awesome we are. Nothing, nothing, yay, compares with my people. So there's these different elements that you're supposed to that I find I love bringing together, and I love seeing in other authors, them bring it together.
No, right. That's a fantastic answer, and it's I think Joseph will be very glad to listen to it, because I think you've hit all
Okay, I
the
hope so.
ideal points, and I have no complaints. Um, Fisto, comments?
No, I have nothing to add to that.
No
Perhaps my
retard
own thoughts.
comment?
No, I know. Definitely, Krynn, you are not a retard by any stretch of the imagination, my friend. You have passed the test and shall go into the West. No,
Oh, good.
no.
I'm staying behind.
One thing that it makes me think of is, the lesson I'm doing in school right now. I'm doing my final project, and I'm kind of trying to do some magnum opus stuff at the moment. And when I say
Mhm.
magnum opus, I think about the things that you write about, and I think about the way that you say it, and I want to show kids that, or at least the few that are receptive to it, that heroism is possible. And on
It
Monday, I'm
is.
and on Monday I'm going to discuss um, the geography of the moon, and I'm going to discuss Apollo
Mm.
11 and Apollo 13 especially. And I think from an
Oh, that's
American
cool.
perspective, one of the things that is just so amazing about the Apollo missions, besides just getting there in the first place, holy shit. But
Mm.
Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem. Oh, boy, right? Guys are halfway to the goddamn
Mm.
moon, have this massive malfunction. All of their lives are in desperate danger. And it's just, all right. I mean, they spit in the face of death and they make it home. They survive. Like, are there any three badder motherfuckers on the planet? Like dead ass. It's hard to imagine three individuals who did not have to have the mental stamina of mythic heroes.
Giants.
Yeah, to get through
Yeah.
that and not break under the pressure. Stuff like that to
Oh my
point out and go,
God.
guys, these people exist. This is possible. And if you
But
choose it, you can do it.
yeah,
You can
and
be
like
this kind of person.
one hero I used in one lesson once, and my brother loved to sit and use it in every lesson when he's teaching about heroism, is Léo Maggiar, the greatest Quebec soldier or Canadian soldier. And he fought against about 100 Germans and won single-handedly in urban combat. He captured all of them. And the man went in knowing he was probably going to die, but he took them all down, but he
Yeah.
didn't even spill too much. He captured them, but he also did it to prevent any mass bombardment of the place, because, if he can secure the place, there's no need to bombard. So he does this, even though for all he knows, he might soon get bombarded, and he might even get shot down by the Germans. But what does
Yeah.
he go and do? He goes and fucking does it. But
Yeah.
another point that stands out to me is, I know some might not like it, but the SS Waffen Charlemagne, those guys were doomed. Like, they're up against the Soviets, they're coming into Berlin, and 1,300 Frenchmen decided, well, if they're going to die for the Third Reich, fuck it. They'll kill every guy that comes after them. And almost all of them died. But just the stones it took to just say, fuck it, we're going to stand our ground. You're not, if you're going to take the city, you're going to kill every one of us. 59 of them survived. Only one of them survived to 1959.
You
And
know, sorry, to
the
get back
idea
to,
of
sorry,
doomed
finish.
heroes is something that appeals to me more on the Nordic mythological aspect because of Ragnarok and
Hmm.
all the gods who are doomed to die. And this is truly heroic. And what I found really interesting on my last teaching contract was in ESL was that it was in Quebec. And what happened was that my students were obsessed with Norse mythology. And they wanted me to read Norse myths in a Scottish accent for some reason. And I could do it. But the thing is, they were just obsessed. They wanted me to read to them at various points the story of Odin or of Balder and whatnot. So, and this is the direct ancestor to fantasy, which honestly, like, so the spirit of heroism is still alive, and kids love it. They love
Yeah.
it.
I want to say, to get back to Alex's original question, when do Americans have a nation? I think it's when you have people that draw a line in the sand and say no further. And I think back
Mm,
to the kinds of things that we talk about in European history. I was thinking of the siege of Malta when Suleiman came after Malta, and Valletta just line in the sand, Knights Hospitalier, screw you and the ship you rolled in on. Nope, you're not taking this rock. And I think of like Apollo 13. These guys are getting home. That's it. Get it done. Like stuff like that. And then on the flip side, this is one of the reasons why, like in my most recent piece, I wrote about Texas as a potential imperial core for the United States in the far future. They have the Alamo. This is it right here. Whatever happens, happens, and that's it. And there's no
great
question.
battle.
There's no
Mm,
debate. It's and even if it ends poorly, even if people lose their nerve and just in the bat, like, well, at the end of the day, They all bought the farm, like things like that where it's this is it, and I don't give a fuck.
Yeah,
That's it.
great
I,
battle.
I I think that's when you have a nation. That's when we are deciding what Americans are, is when we're drawing a line in the sand and saying this is it right here,
All
no
right.
further.
Yeah,
Whatever
and
happens,
what's
win or lose. Because one of the things I love about the German stuff, and it's in vogue to knock on the Germans in World War II, but like you think back, obligatory Ernst Jünger, right? Storm of Steel,
yeah,
where he's talking about these men in the trench. It's like we might be crushed, but we'll never be conquered. Like,
yeah,
let's
which
go. The
which
masculine ideal,
relate.
right? The
Yeah,
masculine urge to die for your homeland. Like,
yeah, which ironically, how you mentioned that, that's also how Quebec was founded because
yeah, man.
the Abraham.
Yes.
We lost, we got conquered, but ultimately we said, "Fuck it, we're still on est encore
Yeah.
français. Va foutre un
Yeah, I
back. Go
can't.
fuck yourself."
It's funny. Having educated myself on the history of Canada recently, it's like, you know, the United States tried to come after you guys, and it's just, nah. You know what? Respect. Fair enough. Like, can't even be
Yeah.
mad about that. And that's something I've always enjoyed about like Roman mythology and the Roman triumphs. Like, they would
Mm,
lose or they would win, like they would beat their enemies and they would remember them in the triumphs. They'd be contained. I mean,
yeah.
granted, it was Rome conquered you, but an aspect of the culture was preserved in the triumphs. And when the Romans lost,
Yep.
well, what did they do? They copied you. They're like, hey, Hannibal,
Yeah.
that's pretty clever. I'm gonna go ahead and do it better. Like that's come on.
Yeah.
That's
Because
that.
Scipio Africanus
Yeah,
was awesome.
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
the Romans conquered the Greeks, but the Greeks conquered the Romans.
yeah,
That's kind of a
Yep.
and even
standard
the
historical,
yeah.
saying where they militarily conquered the Greeks, but the Greeks culturally conquered them.
So is this like when you adopt a puppy and it's like who saved who?
Right. Same, pretty much.
Yeah.
Interesting. Kind of a quick aside. We just got a last minute kind of question, and it's from Kevin M, who's awesome. What's up, Kevin? All right.
Kevin.
He basically he's asking if you would talk on your space project, but you actually
Oh,
just talked on it, right? And but
yeah.
I'm gonna challenge you actually, Fisto, because in 2 weeks
Okay. Come at me.
we're gonna have our solo episode, right? And I think
Yeah.
that we can focus that episode, a big chunk
Let's
of
do
it,
it.
on that, because I want to hear about it too, and that gives you
Well,
a good 2 weeks to prepare more, so you can lay it out for us.
let's do a bit of an experiment. And Krynn, I would actually love to hear your perspective on this from in the spirit of what makes good art, right? That excellent answer you just provided.
Mhm.
I'll give you guys a brief what's going on so far. So my goal, so the class I teach is basically geography, but it kind of acts as like introductory to social studies. So I'm lucky that I have a lot of latitude in what I actually end up teaching. And what I've gone over this year is I basically took the kids through like a high level cultural overview from the beginnings of ancient Greece all the way to the fall of Constantinople. That was the first semester. The second semester has been
Mhm.
the age of exploration. We did a 2 week unit on Japan that was absolutely fantastic. We did a couple of
Mm.
weeks on Russia, and then we started getting into literature and books like Animal Farm and various short stories. And then I took 2 weeks having them read The Great Gatsby. So what I want to
Mm.
do is now whether or not humanity makes it out of Earth is beside the point. But I'm going to try to teach them the geography of the solar system and then have them imagine what a culture might produce. I'm going to make them basically speculate on the culture and then create a story, create
Mm.
art, basically create a myth based on that culture and what it would do. And so, for example, today I tried to help them understand the size of the universe, the size of the solar system, and how that really changes things when compared to Earth geography. Tomorrow, I'm going to discuss the motion of the planets and the motion of the solar system and how that astrophysics really changed the nature of the map. And then I'm going to start using next week robotic probe missions to like flesh out, okay, what do we know about these places and how are people going to live on them? And what are some of the speculative fiction ideas of how this might work? And, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, I want to communicate, I want to test their ability to think and I want to test their ability to imagine and take all the stuff we've learned over the years and think about it, or over the year and think about it. But I also want them to kind of think, hey, you guys can dream big and do amazing things. You don't have to settle for going to college and getting that bullshit degree and getting an email job. Like you could just go conquer Rome. You can just go conquer Gaul. You can just go build civilization. You can build Rome in North America. Just go do that. And even if they don't, join SpaceX or what, I mean, I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want them to be like, wait a second, I can just do
Great.
that? Yes, you can. Go buy this sign conquer. Like that's kind of what I
Yeah.
want to tell them.
That's
So
such a cool project, man.
yeah,
I think I would have
I
loved to
hope
have that in
so.
high school, man, because it's kind
Same.
it's kind of like in a way you're doing what a science fiction author does is like let me extrapolate from today and
Yeah.
into the future and add these elements. How would these things change the elements and that kind of stuff?
I
It's awesome.
Execution is
I might
one
have
thing.
been
Like the
able.
idea is one thing, but execution is a bitch, man.
Right. It is,
Holy
yeah.
crap. But
Yeah,
anyway, what do you think?
I think that's awesome.
All right.
Um,
Good.
I don't know what else to say. It's just awesome.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
such a cool end project, you know?
I'll let you
Uh,
know how it goes.
yeah,
In 2 weeks, maybe it'll be,
Yeah,
well,
please
that
do.
sucked. Yeah, right.
well, you know what though? You tried. You know what? And
Yeah,
you didn't follow some rote memorization type nonsense, that gets pushed on teachers and so ultimately it is
yeah.
what it is,
I
Um,
had, man,
Absolutely. Let us
hold
know
on real,
how.
real fast. I had a student today tell me that one of their teachers hasn't done anything for the past 2 months because, quote unquote, they've already learned everything, end quote. And that just
Then
wanted me to
show them.
like, I wanted to get that. I wanted to just cast American magic and blat, blat, blat. Like, my God, what? No. You've learned everything? You know,
right,
all right,
right.
I'll settle
Yeah.
down. I'll settle down.
This
But
is
man, what a
this is
what a bunch
also
of
why
bullshit.
I want to teach. This is why I'm expanding to being able to teach French and history so that I could make sure that, there's never an end to the learning and the
Yeah,
material.
learned everything.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
bullshit.
It's like, I'm done.
Pistols
No.
at dawn. I mean,
Well, that's how
that's what
my
that is.
that's my daughter. That's what she thinks, but she's sick, so she's allowed to think like
That's
that.
okay.
You
It's
know what I
okay.
mean?
You're allowed
Um,
to be dumb when you're
Well,
six, not when you're
six-year-old,
not when you're a grown adult.
uh,
but that being said, don't 6-year-olds know everything? I
they
thought they
do.
did.
She
Yeah,
does. She knows
yeah,
absolutely everything. She knows everything
yeah,
she should know
absolutely.
as a 6-year-old. And another question, right? This one once again for you, man. This is from Mr. John Baselius. Baselius? You can
Something
go
like
ahead and
that.
tell me how I said it wrong on time. Now, Mr. John Baselius, right, has the very elite status of being the first listener to join the private Telegram channel that we started last week, right? It was kind
The
of an
most
idea.
elite.
Ooh,
Mostly, it's kind of an idea I had, off the top of my head one day, like, we should have a private Telegram channel for all the paid subscribers.
yeah.
I think I'm going to invite all the prior guests into it also because they're basically like paid
Please.
subscribers, but you should all be paid subscribers, guys, because me and Fisto need to eat that bread, right? Um, so John says and you guys go in order, okay? And we'll try to keep it kind of short because we're running out of time. What is the most important thing for each of you for claiming personal agency and in quotes just doing stuff? If you had to pick only one thing for you personally or your family to start with. So what is kind of I guess he's asking what is the locus of our being when it comes to uh our agency, our personality, and getting things done. What would you say? Take it off, man.
Well, as far as I'm not, I hope I understood the question. As far as the locus of my being and what gives like the personal agency thing, I'm not sure. I just know that, um, well, since I was about 11 and I knew I had to be a writer, and since I was 14, I knew I had to write for France and Rome and the secondary home of my family, Scotland. I had to write for them mythology. It's just, it's kind of like, uh, the hand of destiny. It's like, well, I know that's what my life's about. I can't, I've tried not writing and my life was just shittier for it. And I was never happy. But when I got back to writing and doing so very passionately, you know, things worked out better. Like, I'll be honest, life after COVID's been pretty shit for the most part, but what gives me something to look forward to every day and that allows me to say, well, I'm not just the cleaning guy, or I'm not just the ESL teacher that principals like to shit on when I'm in Japan or Quebec or something. I'm the guy who goes home and he writes, these big sweeping stories. So it's really about a feeling that I was put on this earth to give to my culture, to my people, something. So it's not that I choose to write my stories, it's that I have to write my stories. I don't have, like, when I run out, when the time comes that, I hit like 70 or something and I'm like, well, that's done. It'll be time for me to go. I'm only on this earth as long as I need to be to write the stories I need to write. And then when I run out, well, it'll be, the curtain will close and I'll be done. So it's about destiny for me.
All right. This is a great answer, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hmm.
Thank you. I'll take it this time, Fisto.
All right.
You
Okay.
can
I do
go.
have something I want to say, but
Yeah, no,
absolutely after you,
you go
sir.
last
Please do.
because you talk too
Heck
much.
yeah.
I'm just joking. Um, I think for me, John, I have a drive, a kind of need to be in the world, right? Um,
Hmm.
I my main failing, if I had a failing in life, is that I am somebody that can be prone to not the sloth, that's not the right word for it because I'm not in any way lazy, but in a sort of bored inaction, right? And I tend to, in my older age, I tend to become consumed by anxiety and get stuck in silly stuff like, oh, I'm going to pay my bills, am I going to do this and that kind of stuff, you know? And on and on and on. Whenever I slip into this kind of mode, I just come across the same kind of idea, which is, straight out of the Bible, the look up to the birds of the sky quote, I think it's from Mark, right? Consider the birds, right? And that God will provide and not to be worrying about tomorrow, but to worry about today and that kind of stuff. And my best kind of decisions in life have always been where I haven't worried about tomorrow, where I've just lived in the moment, whether it was joining the military so I can go on adventures through, Afghanistan and the South Pacific, or deciding on the spur of the moment to change our course of action and have a child, to move across the country and, retire in South Carolina, to, just randomly go on trips that I planned, to starting a podcast a year and a half ago, and the spur of the moment kind of stuff. I felt like that's when I'm at my best. And there's a need in me to be part of a conversation, right? To connect to people, to um, I have things to say and I want to learn things and I want to say them and I want to learn them. I want them challenged. I want to challenge others and I want to talk. I want to be part of a community, right? And that's kind of where my need is, and that's I guess that's why I'm doing a podcast, right? And that's why I write is because I want to do what I'm doing now. I want to talk to you guys. I want to learn from you. I want to, and the most value I've ever gotten out of life is through these kind of connections and these sort of adventures. So that's mine. Fisto?
Um, I'd have to say when it comes to just you can just do things. The one thing that I personally learned, or at least was able to do successfully this year, and I suppose if you wanted to think of it from scripture, it's the whole idea of letting your yes be yes and your no be no. You've got to know what your limitations are. Like just doing stuff doesn't mean you can do anything. It simply means that the ball is in your court. What will get done, and it's up to you to figure out what those things are. But like for example, I did a play recently, And as many listeners will know, I suffer from chronic illness. So I don't always have the capacity. Sometimes I just crash and it's just, that's it. I'm on the couch and I'm done. Right. So when I decide to do something, I have to really weigh it. And when we did this play recently, I communicated with my wife. I told my wife, listen, I'm going to need like 2 or 3 days to really think about this. And she understands. Like she understands that I'm taking a couple of days because I really do want to kind of just let it sit and decide. And I kept thinking about it and I kept thinking about it. And I kept wanting to do it. I kept wanting to do it. And I understood the potential consequences. And just after a few days, I couldn't not say yes. You know what I mean? Like it was just clear that yes, yes, I have to do this and I will do it. And she knew that, she understood the full import of what that meant. We went and did it. We did the play and it was a wild success and we had a great time. And it was a very nice thing for my hometown. So, since then I've been a little fried, but I kind of knew that was going to happen and it is what it is. But really knowing my limits and respecting those limits, because if you don't, you're gonna, you're gonna just end up taking yourself out. So it's tricky. It's tricky, but understanding what you're capable of and not, I think, is actually more important than people realize when it comes to just do things.
Great answer, man. All right, so we are approaching our 2 hour mark. So before we call it out, for our listeners, where do you recommend people go and read your stuff? What should what do you where's a starter for you? Okay, I know you follow you on Substack. We're having some technical.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I think we're. Oh no.
We're having technical difficulties. So I'll answer while we get these fixed up. We're losing you there,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, Krynn, don't know if you can hear us, but it sounds like the orcs have come for you. Fight or die well.
Well, while we're there, I'll answer Laggy's question. That was the saving for last. Celebrity crushes. Well, I'll tell you my celebrity crush growing up, okay? And it kind of set the tone for my life, right? Can you guess, Fisto, who my celebrity crush was?
Oh no. Oh boy. Laura Palmer.
I didn't get into Twin Peaks until I was much older.
Damn it.
It was like maybe
Um,
5, 6 years ago. That's
all right, who is it?
Winona Ryder. Okay.
Oh, I knew
All
that
right.
because that's mine. Because
Oh,
that's mine.
oh, get off my girl, bro.
No, man.
All right.
Tag team,
So,
let's
I
go.
mean, Winona Ryder, obviously,
Ah,
in Beetlejuice, but even though she's like a little kid, but
perfect.
I saw Beetlejuice when I was like 7 for the first
Yeah,
time.
so it's
So,
okay. Exactly. I
it's
was 9,
okay.
so it's fine. It's
And
fine. It's
then,
not weird.
Winona Ryder and Edward Scissorhands, when she's like blonde and like the suburban girl, that just, and
Yeah.
then of course, peak Winona Ryder in Bram Stoker's Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, when she's Mina Harker. I just, it just wins,
Hey man, hey man. When she showed up as Spock's mom in Star Trek, I was kind of like, okay, hey girl,
Oh,
how
yeah.
you doing?
She's
Where
got
you
that
been?
Well, no, she's a human,
No,
right?
yeah, yeah,
She's a
exactly.
human,
Yeah,
right?
she just
Yeah.
had a quick cameo as Spock's mom, and I was like,
Um,
looking fine there, girl.
like I think she's still good in Stranger Things, even though she's
Yeah,
like in
man.
her mid to late 40s. Um,
Would.
also, what else? I guess I could say there's. I really, really liked Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction. Okay, as Mia Wallace, that for some reason imprinted in my head. Uh, and then the one that my wife always picks on me for, she's like, "Ah, you're like the only person in the world that thinks she's like super hot." I like Fairuza Balk.
Who? I don't know her.
Fairuza Balk she was the villain in The Craft, like the Three Witches movie.
Oh, okay. All
But
right. All
she
right.
was also the crazy Nazi girlfriend in American History X, and she was in that movie Waterboy. But I've never really seen that movie. But I liked her in The Craft and American History X.
Nice.
All right,
Can you hear
uh,
me?
yeah, you're
There he
back.
is.
You fought off the
There he
orcs,
is.
man. You
Uh,
survived.
Well done.
finally back. Sorry about that.
I
No
don't know if you
worries,
missed
man.
my last question to you before we go.
No,
Uh,
celebrity crush.
Yeah. What where would you point our listeners to read more of your stuff? What do you recommend that they, subscribe to your stuff? What should they read? Where should they go? What should they do? And what do you have planned for the future?
Well, there's Crown of Blood, which has lots of blood in it, and that's available on Amazon. I post it all the time on Substack and whatnot. Um, but generally, I'd recommend mostly my fiction stuff because it's fucking fun, writing and reading that stuff. So I'd recommend that. Everything that I make into a serial on Substack will eventually be published. So people will get that in paperback edition through Amazon and whatever the else distributor is available. Primarily through uh, Draft to Digital is how I'm printing it. But I've managed to hook up with a few publishers, so soon I'll be nice and properly published through indie publishers. But that's where just follow me on Substack and I'll just share with everyone, all my fiction and whatnot. But as for celebrity crushes, are we allowed to have a crush on a saint?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Jeanne d'Arc.
Hmm. Okay.
She's the perfect French woman.
Well, I knew you were gonna say that one. Um,
Yeah. But my brother likes Saint Genevieve, but what does he know? But as far as
You guys are so
cinema's
wholesome. You guys are so wholesome with your
yeah.
Saints and Alex and I over here. Winona Ryder, baby, let's go.
I also like
Oh,
She's
Saint.
okay.
great.
As a
I
kid, I
like
was
Saint. I like
Cam
Saint Mary of Egypt. To be honest, if we're gonna mention female
Good
saints,
choice.
Oh boy.
Well, but for female celebrities, Cameron Diaz from The Mask. When I was a kid, I really thought she was the hottest thing that ever walked on two legs.
Okay.
Um, but now I don't even remember what was her last movie.
Yeah,
I
she's kind
have
of
no
fallen
idea what she's
off.
at.
Funny
Yeah, I
enough,
guess.
she actually went to high school and at my sister high school, and one of my
Oh
best
wow.
friend's cousin dated her for a long time. So she like I don't think I ever ran into her, but she was part of like my greater like friend group community before she became like famous.
Hmm.
Good
Cool.
You
times.
know who I also like? I like oh, what is her name? Michelle Monaghan. She's
Who?
she's the wife in True Detective season one. She's Marty's wife in that show, and she is currently in the third season of The White Lotus. And I like her a lot. She's a great actress. Um,
I don't know either of those shows.
oh, you got to watch True Detective.
So,
It's the best show
all right,
ever, besides
will
Twin
do.
Peaks. Besides
I'll
Twin Peaks,
I'll do it while I'm doing my homework.
it has like a really great theme to it. I should actually write like a
By
whole.
theme, you mean she has a great ass,
Well,
right?
interestingly enough, she's actually not the supposed to be the hot one in the show. Alexandra Daddario is like that character.
Ooh,
She's like the good wife that. Well, I can't spoil it because it's a pretty short season. Um, but she's like a very like pivotal character. She's like part of the trio of characters, in my opinion, in that show that make it such an important show. It's probably one of the most based shows of the last like 20 years, for a specific reason. And it kind of appeals to, I think it appeals to both your like materialistic, nihilistic kind of sensibilities in the early episodes. And then there's a strict, metaphysical, I would say, Christian arc
ooh,
towards the end of the show, which all the
love
atheist bros
metaphysics.
hated, but I think it just made the show. It was obviously heading there in the proper direction, because that's how things are. But yeah, that's my other one, and I think that covers all the questions. There was one question about like what books and stuff influenced you. We know I've talked about that in a long time. We're running out of time. The Dostoevsky, of course.
I
If you,
could just,
hmm?
I could just quickly list a
Yeah,
few.
go list
Silmarillion,
some. This is okay.
Chanson de Roland, um, The Hour of the Dragon. There's also Mark Twain's Jeanne d'Arc, Call of the Wild, and also, let me real quick, and Dracula, obviously,
Okay.
for just a few quick
Yeah.
stories.
Hour of the Dragon is a Conan, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about the Conan kind of novel. For people that aren't familiar with that, those are all excellent.
Fun.
Fisto, his favorite stuff is like The Expanse. He likes The Expanse a lot.
I do like The Expanse very much, but I'd say probably the most influential book for me has been Starship Troopers, because I'm literally living the Mr. Dubois character arc. Did you know? Hey, oh, I forgot to tell you guys, Alex, you especially. So next year, it's confirmed I'm going to be teaching government, and it is literally a class that you have to take, but you don't have to pass, just like in
Oh,
Starship
wow.
Troopers. I am Mr. Dubois. Do you know how exciting that is for me?
That is pretty
I don't have to
exciting.
give a fuck what these little shits think. It's fantastic. Anyway,
Nice.
just teasing.
Just
I love all
just
my
for
students. I do not speak to them like this unless it's perhaps in debate club, but we keep it real in debate club. So deal with
yeah.
it.
That's fantastic. I mean, you guys, if you listen, you've listened to mine. You know, obviously, the Brothers Karamazov is my favorite novel. I like both Dostoevsky. Kind of,
Yeah.
I would say like the trilogy of the end of his life trilogy, which is Crime and Punishment, Brothers Karamazov, and The Idiot, are the three novels that I put. And Demons. So there's four actually. Those are the
Yeah.
peak Dostoevsky. Hmm?
I gotta add something. I'd have to say probably the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis and also Mere Christianity. Because like that discussion we had the other day, like C.S. Lewis kind of stalks around in the back of my mind. And I think I need to reread some of his stuff to like bring that back to the forefront of my cognitive meditations.
You know what? Was I
Because
right? Was that
he's back
where
there.
the idea came
Yeah,
from? Okay.
I'm almost
Okay.
90% certain it was C.S. Lewis. Because I
Okay.
know he's talked like that. He's talked about that stuff. But then also Screw Tape Letters, which is in a lot of ways kind of in a roundabout way where my pen name comes from.
Right.
So
Well, I
that
mean, we
the
think
that
we
kind
think
of
about
thing.
that. You know, I think about screw tapes letters all the time. You know, and
It's so good.
what I like about C.S. Lewis is that he, my wife and I have these conversations all the time, right?
Yeah.
Specifically since we've started going to church, and my wife is, you know, my wife was, uh, she's her family is half Protestant on one side and Roman Catholic on the other, but she predominantly went to Protestant church and grew up like that kind of like pseudo Protestant type of thing going on. And you know, she walked into the Orthodox Church about a month ago, right before Easter, and she's like, "Okay, I'm this is it. This is the place, right?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"Thank God, I'm so happy," you know.
Yeah.
But like all, you know, great women, she has dived into it 10 times more than I dived into it, you know, because in a way I take a lot
Mhm.
of stuff for granted. So she's, you know, she comes at me and she asks me you know, asks me these questions that like blow my mind. And I'm like, well, go, you should ask the priest that, not me, because you know, this one's beyond my capabilities, you know, you should go ahead and call father up and ask him a question, you know? But one of the things we always talk about kind of goes back to C.S. Lewis because she's a big fan of the screw tape letters. And,
Yes.
you know, one of the things with Christianity is that it is a faith. It's a religion in a way that it's a very interesting one because unlike a lot of other, sorry about that, my dogs are telling me to shut up, quiet. Um, unlike a lot of you know religions in the world, it is a religion that is suitable because it's true, right? But it's suitable for both the simple mind of a peasant and the complex mind of an academic theologian, you know. And I think
Mm.
ultimately it's easier to be a peasant, right? Your ability to grasp the concepts of faith are sometimes a lot easier with a simple mind, because the more we think about it, the more twisted we get, and the more paths we get down, and it's almost like we need more, you know, more. intellectualism, more justifications, more, sometimes you have to be like, stop, we're overthinking this kind of stuff, right? We're looking at it in such an obtuse way, in such an autistic way, But what's interesting about Screw Tape Letters and really all of C.S. Lewis's writing is that he writes from such a kind of a hobbit mindset. He's such a simple, he writes very simple, very direct.
Yeah.
Mere Christianity was not even a book, it was actually radio talks, right? And he is so, in a way, very like the uncle that's telling you something. But at the same time, his entire body of work is very academic. He
Hmm.
approaches Christianity in a very academic world. And one of the things about Screwtape that I really liked and stuck out to me is how not, I guess, not temptations, but one of the ways that Screwtape was leading the subject astray was that he pointed out kind of the peasantness of some of the people in his church. He almost looked down his nose at people and their silly superstitions, and that's what he was doing. It was not. It was He was basically feeding into the pride, the intellectual pride of the subject of Screwtape, right?
Yeah.
And
Wormwood was the student. Screwtape was the
Wormwood, yeah, yeah,
uncle.
Wormwood, right?
Yeah,
And he was
Wormwood.
telling him, he's like, make him look down on the people at his church as like, country bumpkins and that kind of thing, that believe all kinds of silly things. And it's so easy to do that from our position sometimes because, you know, we might go to a church and, we're pretty well read and we can talk about the Byzantine Empire and all this stuff. And then you go to church
Yeah.
and you meet somebody that's just, you know, just a normie, just a common old person, that just, and you're like, ugh, this person doesn't even know about, Justinian or something like that,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's very easy for us to fall into that kind of mentality and look down upon the less well
You
read,
know,
you
I
know?
think I think I think there's an essay to be written where it's a comparative study between Gandalf and Screwtape, where they're two sides of the same coin, or not two sides of the same coin, but they're shadows of each other, or maybe
Right.
Screwtape is the shadow version of Gandalf
Well, it is
because the way
because
they nudge, the way
because
they nudge,
the
you
devil
know?
perverts, right? The
Yeah,
devil
man.
perverts while
Yeah.
God leads and
I think
welcomes.
have have you read the Space Trilogy?
I have not. I have not.
It's three books. The first one was called Out of the Silent Planet. I forget the name of the second book, and then the final book is That Hideous Strength.
Right. I
And
know.
it's about a guy who travels to Mars and travels to Venus. And it's like it's like trippy shit. It's before we knew anything about those places.
Right.
And if I recall, Lewis really kind of cuts loose. It's like, holy shit, dude, where did all this come from? Like it's kind of it gets really that hideous strength, especially is basically a warning against like the technocratic neoliberal elite. And it is terrifying. It's just, my God, dude, the dark places that book goes. I loved it.
I
It's
know.
been a long time since I read it, but I remember it very fondly.
I know Lisa loves it, right?
Yeah.
She's all about it,
It's
right?
trippy as hell, man. Guy flies to Venus and like hangs out naked and is like the new man of Eden or some shit. It's just, it's out there, man.
Right.
Anyway,
All right, guys. So that was the end of our episode. We went a few minutes over. Thank you, Mr. Brothers Krynn, for joining us. Um, it was a wonderful
Pleasure.
conversation,
yeah,
and
man, real pleasure, dude. It was
I
really great.
when I sat down today, that was the last thing I expected was to go into this complex thing about European Christianity and
Yeah.
but that's the beauty of this show, of this conversation, is that well, we set guardrails, we break the guardrails also all the time because sometimes you just want to talk about what you want to talk about,
Yep.
um, for all you listeners out there, right? Please go ahead and go to Brothers Critten's Substack, right? Well, of course, it's going to be linked, and let's be honest, most of you guys are already familiar with his work, and uh, it's at the Brothers Krynn. I spelled it the Brothers Krynn. If you don't feel like clicking on the link, and he's number 21 rising in fiction. I just noticed that, dude.
Spread the word,
Congratulations.
kids.
All
Oh,
right.
Spread the
really?
word.
I
Yeah.
just realized that.
Yeah.
That's
It says
fantastic,
number
man.
21 rising in fiction. We are I think I was numbered 85 rising in fiction also, or in literature. So it's pretty interesting. That's what this podcast was, but whatever. I don't trust Substacks stuff anyways.
Look, until I see you rising in shit posting, I don't even
Right.
care.
Don't care,
I
you
don't even
know.
care. I don't even
Yeah,
care.
Right.
yeah. It's not
Number one
important.
Whatever.
in
Shitposting is by
retardation, the Black
itself.
Ibis Society. Right. Um, but also, so go ahead and subscribe, send him your money, read his stuff, share his stuff, because that's how we continue the conversation. Also, we do have a paid account for the Black Ibis Substack. There will be tons and tons and tons of exclusive content coming up this summer. I have so much planned that I'm gonna vomit so much stuff in your guys' direction, and you're gonna be tired of listening to me. Every single episode, our weekly conversation episodes will always be free. Okay. That is like a promise I'm making. I've made it from the very beginning. The goal of this podcast is to, call people retarded. Right now, I'm just joking. The goal of this podcast is to spread conversation and, build a community. So we'll always have these episodes free. But we do need some money, right? Because the stuff costs money. Like the Zoom account itself costs money, the microphones cost money, my internet costs money. Both Fisto and I have families that we need to feed and that kind of stuff. I have dogs. You can hear them; they're barking. Their food is expensive. One of them has to eat really expensive food. I'm allergic to cats, but I have a cat, so I got I need your money, right? No, I'm just joking, guys. I'm not begging for money. But there will be some exclusive stuff for everybody to make it worth your time. Also, thank you very much for all the subscribers. We have a bunch already, and I really appreciate it. And I want to make sure we do a lot of stuff for you specifically, right? And thank you for all the guys I've been listening to for over a year now. I'm going to try to get to your questions. I'm going to try to do stuff for you guys. We did start the Telegram thing where you guys can just send us direct messages. The reason I did the Telegram thing is because Substack is kind of weird, and I feel like I miss a lot of posts because
Yeah.
I tend to have
Yeah.
like weird like internet ADD, like the internet disgusts me, but I always have like Telegram on my phone because that's what I use to talk to my wife. So we can have some better conversations in there. I'm gonna reserve that for paid members. So if you're a paid member, I already sent out an email. There's a logged post that has like the little QRC code. If you didn't get it or you missed it or whatever, look through the Substack, you'll find it. If not, I'll just go ahead and invite you in there. We're gonna eventually, the more and more we grow, we're gonna keep like questions and that kind of stuff exclusive to those guys because it's only fair. But we'll do that. We've got next week. Do you know who's coming on next week?
You told me,
I sent you an
and I've
email.
completely forgotten.
All right, Mr. Uncouth Barbarian is
Yes, Uncouth
returning.
returns.
Uncouth
Ooh,
returns,
that's gonna be
right?
Yeah,
awesome.
actually, that'll be great. Uncouth and I had a discussion today, actually. I fleshed out some of my ideas regarding the school project. So
Okay.
that timing turns out really, really, really well.
All right.
So
Well,
we're
we
going to
were
make Aristotle great again,
right. So
basically.
talk about
So
that. Well, him and I were chatting on, on Substack chat or whatever, and we were. One of the things I want to talk to him about is that I want to talk about the 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 difference between an urban future versus a more rural world. How can we apply kind of our beliefs and our ideas both to an urban versus a more rural, because he's a rural guy, right? So I think that's very interesting. You're kind of the in-betweener, Fisto, because you are kind of like ex-urban. I mean, I guess I'm ex-urban myself, but I grew up in Los Angeles, so I have a lot of experience with living in big
yeah,
cities. I'm a
I grew up in a suburb, man. I grew up in a bedroom community
right.
up near Cleveland.
Well, that's
So I
where
mean, I'm white picket fence boy.
right. You're
That's the
you're
skin
the
right here.
middle. Well,
Same.
I grew up very urban,
Yeah.
and now that I'm living in basically in a small town, but it's not really a small town. It's like 30,000 people or something like that.
Holy crap, that's a big city.
Right. I live on the edge of Savannah. So basically, I live on the edge of a medium to small American city, but I came from Los Angeles. So, I'm used to big cities. I lived in Tokyo and I'm from Bucharest, which is another very big city. So my entire life is very urban. But like, that's kind of what I want to talk about and how do we apply ideas and what's the importance? Do we need urban cities? Do we need rural only? I think it's interesting and he's the right person to talk about that.
Yeah.
And of course,
Mm.
The week after that, we're going to have our solo episode where we're going to talk about whatever comes to mind and probably school stuff. And then, we're pretty much open after that. I know I'm going to get, what's his name back? What is his name? Copernican back. He wants to come back on. I haven't gotten around to inviting people because I tend to base these Wednesdays off my work schedule. So when there's like, different work stuff, my daughter's finishing school. She's finishing first grade. So she's going to be home a lot more and she's starting different dance programs. So I have to kind of adjust around that. So we'll set up the summer schedule coming up. But yeah, I'm excited. We got a lot of cool stuff. We'll probably do the 4 hours of Winona Ryder because we both had the same answer. We disagree on Panem and Judy, but we agree on Winona Ryder. So there we go. We found our
common ground. Hey, at least we agree on the real one.
Yeah, exactly. We agree on the
in
real
the flesh.
Yes.
Well, you ever have a Cameron Diaz episode? I'll show up for that.
Absolutely. And you're always welcome back. And we chat every single day basically, which is great. Like I feel like I know you guys, man. Like I feel like everybody almost every single guest here, like I've continued a year-long plus conversation with, and I love that. It's kind of it's like I met my goal, we gotta get Alexander back.
You guys ever want to come on a podcast over at Brothers Krynn, we'll be more than happy to have you.
Yeah, cool. I'll come on there and we'll actually talk about fantasy, which was our goal today. But
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, we managed to do it the 2 weeks ago, right? So it sometimes happens. What's funny? I this is kind of another aside, but which kind of illustrates how a lot of us are kind of bored of like the whole online right-wing kind of drama discourse and that type of stuff. We had a 3-hour episode with John Carter last week, and we spent like 45 minutes talking about current event type drama stuff, and then we spent like 2 hours talking about Japan. Which I was listening to that episode when I was editing it, and it was really interesting because we're talking about the whole thing with the thing and blah blah blah, and we're kind of very like mellow in the conversation. And then as soon as we switch to something that we truly really love, which is the Japanese people, Japanese culture, foreign cultures and stuff, like
awesome.
The voice changed completely, like our tone and like our level of enjoyment, and that's why we went on for 3 hours. So it's interesting that
to know Japan is to know love.
Right.
Like, they're just the perfect people in some ways. Right. I love them so much.
My favorite thing about Japan, their artistic culture is their complete and total love and focus on the idea of impermanence, that nothing lasts forever.
Yes.
Everything, they have so many little obsessions with like, their, the famous cherry blossoms, right? It's a love of a moment of impermanence, like the impermanence of beauty, the impermanence of like the spiritual world, and the impermanence of the material world, right? And it's such a cool thing to think about that I love, and you can see that a lot in their literature, specifically like like Yukio Mishima and stuff. It's all about the impermanence and reincarnation and that type of thing. All right, guys. Thanks once again. Thank you very much for coming on, man. It was a wonderful conversation. Fisto, thank you for being my partner and like Winona Ryder and being great. And thank you for all the work you do with your kids, man, because you are creating the future of this country, right?
For better or worse, it's all my fault.
And that's what matters, Plus you're practicing. You're probably gonna have a kid of your own eventually, So
yeah, eventually. That's
get on it. Get on it.
Look, I don't want to like broadcast to the world, but like I'm trying, man.
Well,
we're working on it.
I'll keep you in my prayers when it comes to that, man.
Man. Hope that nature takes its course.
Absolutely.
That nature finds a way.
Right. God willing, all right, because I think you'd make a great parent.
Oh God. I see, I know we got to get going, but maybe we should have a episode on parenting, because I'd rate such a goddamn hellion. I wouldn't even care. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Burn it all. Let's go.
One of the things that, like I said, I will talk about all kinds of like political third rails, but parenting, ooh, that's one that like you're going to get people that hate you for life if you say, you know what I mean? I feel like we kind of touched on parenting with Uncouth last time, and some people were pissed off at me because I'm like a degenerate liberal when it comes to parenting sometimes, you know. But you
It's
know what?
fine.
Me and Lisa talked about parenting a lot when a few
Yeah.
times she was on, and we always kind of default to that.
Uh,
But yeah, you know, looking forward to many, many more years of doing this. Okay. All right,
yes,
guys. Good
sir.
night.
Hmm.
Go ahead and join a Telegram channel, and we'll see you next week.